All right, thank you. It is 9:03 on Saturday, February 12th, 2022, and I'm going to call the Sherborn Select Board meeting to order. I'd like to ask the town administrator to please read the agenda.
Good morning. So now that the open session has been called to order, I'll read the agenda and the board can vote to approve the agenda. 9 a.m. meeting with warrant article proponents for the 2022 annual town meeting. Vicki Relis is here to bring the warrant articles regarding the Juneteenth, adding it to the personnel admin plan, and new wording for Appendix A section of the personnel admin plan. At 9:30 is Heidi Doyle. She's here to read a warrant article to rescind a borrowing, a tax title foreclosure, and a capitalization fund. At 10 o'clock is Sean Colleen. He's here for a Verizon easement for the library, a Verizon easement for Village Way and Leland Drive, and a release right title and interest into a portion of Obed Lane. At 10:30 is a citizen's petition being brought forward by John Hargrave for Rockwood Street maintenance. At 10:50 is Drew Kashow to change the Board of Assessors from elected to appointed professional assessors. And at 12 o'clock is Ellie Hyde, which is a citizen's petition, a declaration of climate and ecological emergency. And I'm just getting buzzed by Vicki now, so we might have to move hers. I'm not quite sure because I don't see her on the list that she's here.
She's not here yet, but I see.
Okay.
That's fine. And honestly, if Heidi is available, maybe we take her first. We flip those two right there. And I think Paul wanted to make an amendment as well to the agenda. So are there any amendments or approvals to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to propose an amendment to the agenda to add a quick executive session to discuss the acquisition and value of real estate.
All right, very good. And Paul, do you want to make that pretty much at the end of the meeting, end of the agenda?
That's up to you. If we have a 30-minute gap between presenters and you have nothing to do, I'll do it whenever you want to do it.
Okay, that makes sense. And maybe while Heidi is on, we flip number 1 and 2. We'll flip Heidi and Vicki.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Vicki's going to try and jump on, but you better take Heidi first.
I'll take Heidi first. Absolutely.
So why don't we, we haven't approved the agenda though. Don't we need to vote to approve?
Yeah, so I need a motion to basically approve with basically Paul's and the amendment I made with flipping Heidi and Vicki.
I move that we accept the adjusted agenda as proposed.
Okay, very good. Very good, thank you. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
And Paul?
Hi, just a quick question. Is council present?
I don't see them on here.
No, they're not here for the meeting today.
Okay, thank you.
And you might, I just let Vicki in, so you might let her know
Oh,
we
perfect,
reversed
okay.
order. Unless you don't want to, if you want to change that plan, but she just joined.
Heidi indicated her schedule might be in flux, but I'd actually like to have Heidi while she's here.
We're going to switch the order, Vicki. We're going to have you go second, okay? I don't know if she can hear me.
No, she's muted. I think it's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So next up is Heidi Doyle for rescind borrowing, tax title foreclosure, and capital stabilization fund. Please, Heidi, go ahead.
Do you want me to share the screen, Heidi? Do you want me to bring it up or no? You just gonna talk to it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk to her. I thought this was a little more informal right now. And then the full presentation when you do the combined session. So the first article is just to rescind the borrowing for the Leland well, 198,000, because right now it's under authorized borrowing, and there's different sources right now of funding. We have ARPA funds from the state as well as ARPA funds that we've allocated. So I would like to formally get that off of our borrowing authorization.
Okay, makes sense to me.
If there's any discussion on it.
Well,
Any
can we
discussion
move
from the board?
approval? This is move approval. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so then
Second.
Do I have a second? A second from Marianne? Okay, all in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Marianne,
aye.
and Paul?
Aye.
I'm also aye. Okay, like I said, no brainer.
Okay, and the second one is we have a tax title foreclosure that has been moving through land court. It's a property on Saddlebrook Road, about 3 acres, went into tax title in 1989. Occasional payments were made through the 90s, but after 2002, there's been no further payments. It's been sitting on our tax roll, keep accumulating. It now has over 94,000 with legal costs and interest on the books. So the motion was filed in land court for final disposition in December. So we are just actually in the process of waiting for that to release from the court, which they said is 6 to 10 weeks, which should be here any day is what we're looking for. But once that happens, the town will have title. We should wait a year before we do something with it to make sure there's no repercussions. This was a property that had many owners that had to be traced. The banks actually decided to look into it when they heard 3 acres in Sherborn. Their ears perked up, and it took longer for them to go through, and they have since decided it's not worth their effort. It's considered an unbuildable lot right now. So there has been an interest expressed from one of the abutters to purchase the land, but until the town officially owns it, and then I'm not sure what the process is. I haven't done this, and I'm hoping Paul might have some memory, because I understand there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it under Mass General Law, Chapter 30B, Section 16, which is a solicitation for bids, or we can go Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 77B for an auction, to have a public auction. I guess there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides. I was trying to bring this up to say I would love to get a motion in town meeting to get the approval, whichever way you want to go, to move forward so we can decide what to do with this property, or if the select board doesn't want to do anything right now, that is an option as well.
Okay. Now I'll ask a quick question. Do you need town meeting approval? Because I've been involved with a couple of these auctions and a couple of tax titles, and haven't had town meeting or legislative approval before. I thought the either collector or the treasurer was kind of given just kind of executive rights on this.
I think it's for an auction. We do have that right, but I think my understanding was if we do a solicitation of bids process, then I believe it was a town meeting vote when I checked with our tax title attorney.
I've been involved with both. I can't remember what we did for a lot of auctions. I can't remember what we did for bids. I don't know. Any other discussion amongst the board?
Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, excuse me, Paul. Is there is there a vote needed to accept the property? That is, I know in the past properties have come up, offered to the town, but because they had liabilities of various kinds, the town opted not to accept. Is that in question here at all?
I think this is a little different. The one I did prior was a gift in lieu of taxes. And this one is an actual foreclosure where we are going to be given the deed. So I don't think there's a chance for us to accept it. I think we will be the owners because of non-payment. Paul, I'm hoping you might have more insight.
Yeah, we have Paul.
So I'm going to recommend that we do the town meeting route here, because I want to offer this land to the Conservation Commission. If it's unbuildable land, it probably ought to be preserved in some way, or maybe it should at least be looked at before we simply dispose of it. So there should be a process by which it's sent around to all possible town departments. It may be that a road needs to be widened there. Maybe there's some stormwater drainage that maybe we want to put there, or whatever. If we have the deed and we're the owners, we're in a position to make sure that any municipal use is taken care of before we dispose of it. If we simply do an auction, we just sell our title to somebody else. We're not able to use it for anything. As part of that, it may very well be that we end up selling part of it to a neighbor. On the other hand, if there's a pond in there, or endangered species in there, or some reason why we would want to preserve it for environmental qualities, then we'd
Yeah.
want to keep it. So before we make the decision to dispose of it, it needs to be circulated widely within the town.
All right.
So then what?
That's a
my
great idea.
recommendation-
Okay,
go
because
ahead,
it could tie to a trail too. It also could be a headway into one of the town's trails. So it could be a way in which you can get more, and Marion's certainly an expert in that area. So
I mean,
think that-
I hear from Nancy in a second, but it's indicated in the tech, and obviously land acquisition has done studies as to, what properties are in interest in the town, should go to land acquisition. I just
Yep.
thought tax title didn't need legislative approval. That's all. This is my background. I thought that, especially if you auction it, that
Yeah,
either
that's
you take
true.
ownership or auction. I just didn't think, but correct me if I'm wrong. Either way, I'm fine with it going to it, but
But the problem
like-
with just, you're right that you don't need legislative approval to auction off a tax title, but the problem here is that gives you no control over it.
yeah.
It
Right.
may well be that we want to put a restriction on this, that it would be not used to give somebody additional land so they can do a subdivision and put up another house. There could be all kinds of things we'd want to think through, which you can't do if you're going to just rely on selling your tax title.
I'd like to get an opinion from land acquisition, but I'd like to hear from Nancy, who has her virtual hand raised. Hi, Nancy.
Good morning. I just want to caution you, when you say you will take it in the name of conservation, I would advise you to take it in the name of the Board of Selectmen, if that's what you do. That will give you more options. And if you have to do a trade as you have in the past to replace conservation, you have more property to make a swap.
That's a good point. I would not put this under Article 97 right off if the town takes ownership of it. That's a very good point. Thank you, Nancy.
Can I
Mary Ann.
make a recommendation that we remove this from this warrant? Because it sounds like we should study it and look to, pass it around. And we have a 1-year waiting period anyway to make sure we have true clear title. And then after it goes through a little bit of internal process, bring it back next year if there's any decision.
What happens at the end of the year? Like if we don't take any action, do we automatically take the deed?
Well, I think we're getting the deed no matter what.
Okay.
I just, it's just a question of who's going to control it.
Okay.
It's something that I just put it in my safe.
Okay.
You wait the year in case the property owner shows up and moves to vacate the judgment. There's a court rule that says you can move to vacate a judgment within 1 year.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure it's final in the name of the town.
Right. But I just don't know who who should talk to. Do you want me to present it to each board individually at this point? Bring it back to you? Is there someone you would like to make as a point person?
Is it usually a treasurer? I thought the collector did these. Is this
It's usually a treasurer collector in a lot of towns.
okay?
The collector goes through the process of making the lien and then turns it over to the treasurer once it's in tax title.
All right. I know the collector back in '89. Mary Ann, you had your hand up and down. Did you you have something you want to say or kind of withdraw?
Well, I just wanted to second what Paul says, and I think we're all on board. Whatever the process, the town should take title and then take the time to decide where the value lies and how to proceed further.
Okay, then maybe we actually take no action on this. Honor Heidi's request to actually withdraw it and look at it kind of over the next year. And I think a recommendation to put it to land acquisition, I think would be a good idea. Okay. Very good. And final one is Capital Stabilization Fund from Heidi.
Yes, so this is a concept I've been thinking about for a while and would like to present. I think I put a table in your packet that was sent out on what would be advantages and disadvantages of creating a capital stabilization fund. And the concept I was envisioning was for something for smaller capital items that are replaced on a fairly routine basis, police vehicles, or if there's smaller equipment. And it would not be limited to that, but that would be the intended purpose. We don't put any, when you make it, you don't create a limitation unless you want to. One of the things is it would save on financing costs. What I'm noticing in the last 2 long-term bonds we did is a lot of these smaller items that we put in there with the shorter term. An example I had the financial advisor put together was if we long-term bonded the 99,000 police vehicles, which we have up in the next one. The estimate is that it's a 5-year item. And a lot of these bonds are structured that there's higher interest applied on the earlier items and then it goes down. So we always go and take the net interest cost on a long-term bid over 20 years. But the looks like this 99,000 could cost us 20,000 in interest and costs over a 5-year period. So it's actually a very high interest cost to the town to put some of these smaller items when they get loaded up front in one of the bonds. So since we have a good free cash amount coming in, this might be the time to try and create a smaller capital stabilization fund where it would strictly be used for capital items, have it build up over the next several years, and then you can use this for alternative funding. We'd actually be earning money on this funds as opposed to paying something, and then it would save on the borrowing. And one of the why I felt this was a good time is I was looking at our fiscal policies and guidelines we created, and Department of Legal Division of Local Services has a recommendation for 3 to 5% that they like to see free cash in. And this year's free cash is actually very high. I was initially putting in my plan as I was making this up, saying we were going to be about 8% at about 2.4 million. It just came in this week at 2.6 million, so it's actually higher. So if we look at trying to maintain a free cash number of 3 to 5%, that's 900 to 1.2 million roughly that we want to roll over each year to maintain our free cash and make it grow a little bit. There's an excess amount that we can use for projects. And it's, as what Jeff knows, it's not always money in the bank exactly, but it is a time where we will have a little more room to use free cash this year. And then one of the areas we always fund was our general stabilization fund, where we want to get that. Our fiscal guideline is minimum of 2% in our general stabilization fund. We are about 2.5% right now. Our guideline says optimally 3%. So if we try to add a little bit into general stabilization account in these next 2 years, we actually will then just be in a maintenance phase of that fund. We won't be putting 100,000 in as we had done in prior years, or even 80,000. It might only be 30,000. And I was looking at that extra room that we used to put in general be put into a capital stabilization fund to help that grow, and that would leave us something to work with. This does align with the best practices. I did a survey about 18 towns, some smaller ones and surrounding ones. And out of those 18, I think I had, what's the number? 15 of them have general stabilization accounts, 11 of them had capital stabilization accounts, and 14 had CPA funds, which we use for a lot of the capital funds as well. So it's a pretty well accepted practice. The DLS is already suggesting too, they did a capital improvement program on Sudbury in 2020, which Sudbury used a lot of debt exclusion similar to us. They have a regional school system, and it was a really good report. And they did suggest that using exempt debt as a primary capital funding mechanism was a risky strategy. And they felt that getting a capital stabilization fund and others would actually help with planning and predictability.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just got a message that actually Vicky Reales has a few minutes before she needs to leave.
Oh.
Do you mind if I put this in a hold a little
No,
bit? And
that's fine.
Vicky? All right. Vicky, if you can still
Thank
speak, and I'm sorry
I
to
can.
have bumped you before. I know
No,
we're
thank
dealing
you.
with people's personal schedules here. Do you have a little bit to talk about your 2 warrant articles?
The initial one is for Juneteenth, which the Personnel Board approved as an official holiday for the town. And the second one is for the TA to the town administrator to have the ability to change the description for jobs with the approval of the Personnel Board. And both of those we've gone through and we've approved, the board.
The Personnel Board, okay. I mean, Okay, let's hear discussion, because I have my thoughts on this. Yeah, Marion?
Okay,
That's it.
Vicky, in the past, changes to job descriptions have come before the select board as well. So I'm just wondering about the division of responsibility between the personnel board and the select board. And perhaps everybody knows this, but me, but it's not clear to me quite. So could you explain that in a nutshell?
I believe the personnel board has the power to approve, has been given the power to approve personnel, job descriptions, as well as changes to salary with the town administrator. The changes to salary, once this all happens, usually with the money, the financial side of it usually goes back to the advisory. And I don't remember that we've ever, with the job descriptions, have referred to the select board, but if that's happened in the past, you guys can remind me that it's happened, but we've had it in the past, but I don't believe it's gone to the select board after we've reviewed it. It usually goes through the town administrator, the person that's responsible, the manager, and then it's approved or disapproved. As long as there's no changes to the actual financial part of it, that's pretty much where we've delineated it.
Okay, the reason I asked is that recently the select board did review the job description for the town administrator. And maybe that's the sole instance in which that happens.
I mean, I actually thought about this, and I think I actually be willing to give some authority to the town administrator to change the job descriptions that are under his or her purview. If something is directly under the select board, which really should be limited to the actual administrator itself, then we can change that. I don't think the select board should actually, chime in on job descriptions too much. It's a political board, and it's got a level of detail that I just personally think is, better left to a kind of a professional administration. That's my thought on that.
I think that's the way we've done it in the past, Eric.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of, if there's been any kind of problem, we raise it to whomever we need to. But from what I understand and what we've done in the past is primarily talk to the TA and also the manager of the, the division that it's going to be referenced to. So
Yeah,
that's how it's worked.
That makes sense, but would
Okay.
this, be in, say, with the exception of the town administrator? Because
Well, I think like Eric said, if they report to you, then you'd be involved.
right.
So that we usually get anybody that that reports to that person reports to, we usually get them involved.
I'm just wondering if that should be, written into the bylaw.
We could. But
Absolutely.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to hear from Diane, please, because her hand is raised.
Hi, I think what we're really talking about is Appendix A that's in the personnel admin plan. And all that is a listing of job titles. So if you were to look at the listing like right now, the sustainability coordinator's name is missing from that job title list. The assistant town administrator's title is missing from that job list. So this is just to give the town administrator position to update Appendix A of job titles. And then he would bring it to the personnel board to say, yes, this is okay. It's nothing to do with the job descriptions right now. It's just.
Sorry, that's my fault. That's the
Okay.
titles only then. Okay.
Okay, that clarifies it. That gives me, okay. Jeff, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I guess a couple things in reverse order, because we did the Juneteenth thing first. It just says the warrant article is to add Juneteenth to the personnel admin plan. I don't know what that means. What does adding something to the admin plan mean?
I think it's listed as an official holiday. So admin plan actually lists certain holidays on there.
Correct.
And in some respect, I actually wanted to kind of hold this until we talked about Columbus Day, because I personally think we should eliminate Columbus Day and put in Juneteenth.
Yeah,
It's probably a very unpopular opinion to actually
what I
vote
just-
in there.
yeah. I just wanted to understand what we were really deciding on. So it would be a paid holiday. Is that what we're saying?
Correct. It's a federal holiday. Correct.
Okay.
And the bargaining
don't-
units would go to whatever they're bargaining. They bargain whatever holidays they have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we would probably then, like the teachers union or someone else, we would have to then have that in the next contract negotiation, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure they'll include it.
Okay, then my second point on the personnel plan, I still think the select board should review the major ones, even though the TA is really the primary one that reports to the select board. We've all been on the search committee, as you know, Vicky, for police chief and everything. So I could see us reviewing the police chief, the fire chief, and the DPW director. If we're going to look, if this is more than the titles and really the job description for those key roles in town, even though they don't directly report to the select board, I think those major, what I call department heads, would probably be good for us to look at, or at least understand why a change was being
Right,
considered.
right. No, I agree with you. I think right now, like Diane said, we're just talking titles. And
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll look at what the language is going forward for the job descriptions. And if it does eliminate the select board on those particular jobs, then we'll put something in for next year to include it for the select board. But I don't
Okay.
think it does,
Okay, thank you.
because they report to you. So that's kind of the tag for that.
Yeah,
Whoever report, then they get to review it. But I'll look at it, Jeff.
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Diane, do you still have your hand is still raised? Okay, it's down there. We took it a little bit out of order, but I think
Thank you
it's
very
gonna-
much for accommodating me.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Do we have any further discussion, or I'm gonna take it out of the personnel, the job descriptions or titles out of warrant article for personnel administration plan, and then I'll talk about Juneteenth after that. Any motions or further discussion?
Well, that's a question for the whole day, actually. Are we going to vote on these things today? Or are we going to wait and vote until the advisory public hearing?
I think we should vote, because usually at the advisory hearing,
Yeah,
we actually state our
correct,
opinion.
correct. Sometimes we wimp out and don't do that, but yes, that's correct.
So if I have a suggestion on this, which is we actually need to see language.
Yeah.
And it seems like what Vicky was starting to present is different from what Diane said is actually the case. And I think before we vote to adopt something, we need to see that it's clearly stated. And there was an excellent point made by Jeff that we want to exempt certain major department heads and not lose control of that. So the language is very important here.
Understandable. I want to recognize Nancy. She has her hand raised.
Yes, the original intent of this was just to allow the TA and personnel to adjust the appendix, because there are jobs missing from there. We don't have the new sustainability coordinator. We don't have some people in there that should be in that appendix recognizing their job. So that was the intent of this. And perhaps because there was no language, it was just a placeholder that got lost in the translation. But if you don't allow a Diane or whoever comes in as town administrator and personnel to fix this, we have to go another year without having those people on the appendix. So it's nothing to do with the changing job descriptions or anybody's authority on that. It's just allowing us to go through and find the jobs that are missing on the appendix and add them without having to go through town meeting to change the personnel plan. So I would ask you to go ahead and allow this to be on the warrant this year.
That does make sense to me. I don't know. I'll hear from Jean in a second. Before I do, I'm wondering, can we like approve this in concept? Do you know what I mean? Based on that, because I get Paul's point, where it's like it's nice to actually see language, so it verifies what we're approving. I guess Jeannie, go ahead.
I thought I had included the language in the schedule for today. Basically, for this, it says to see if the town will vote to amend the personnel administration plan, section 1H of the general bylaws as follows. And it's basically, right now it says is amended from time to time by the personnel board, and that's coming out. And it's just saying by allowing the town administrator to maintain an updated job classification appendix A. That's my fault if I didn't include it.
So actually, it makes it a little bit more concerned. So the town administrator can change the classification, can change the pay grade, essentially. That's something that might be a little concerned that
I don't know.
kind of brought it forward.
Right, because right now, the general bylaw states is amended from time to time by the personnel board. And this is just saying, allowing the town administrator to maintain an updated job classification appendix A with the consent of the personnel board.
Okay. Mary Ann, go ahead. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'd really like to see more clarification of the language specifically. I mean, I would tentatively, I'm with Paul on this, basically, I would tentatively approve it, but I don't want to formally vote until we've seen the language and really understand what it is. And it has to be presented in such a way that the whole town understands it, not just us.
Understood. Any other discussion from the board? Do I sense this kind of a consensus to take a no action on this right now? Do we see language? Okay. In concept, I do agree with this. I have a little issue if it's actually changing the compensation. You know, I don't think that the town administrator can just blanketly say it goes from this grade to that grade or whatever else. I have no problem with the town administrator changing the title or just, you know, correcting it to whatever the industry standard is or to whatever is like commonly done. And that's something which I have no problem with. But I sense we'll probably be in no action right now. Maybe vote when we have the our next Saturday meeting with advisory, unless anyone thinks differently. Okay, how about the article from Personnel Board about Juneteenth? Vicky had to, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So it's state law that has to be a holiday. We don't have a choice. So given it's a mandatory change, we need to adopt it.
Okay. I kind of wanted to join this with the, I know there was a Columbus Day article where they wanted to, you know, reappropriate Columbus Day. I actually wanted to eliminate Columbus Day and actually put in Juneteenth in its place, but maybe that's too political. Is there any other discussion amongst the board?
Yeah, I have a minor question about it. In the warrant, it says Juneteenth, National Independence Day. Is National Independence Day the official name?
No,
Now
no.
for Juneteenth.
No.
So maybe, I'm not sure what the official title of that day is, but I don't think it's National Independence Day, so that's a little confusing.
That sounds like 4th of July, doesn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't like it exactly.
So that should be fixed.
Okay.
But in concept, I approve it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do as well.
I
All right,
do.
Diane.
But does it need to be on the warrant now? If what Paul says is true, maybe we shouldn't vote on it or have it on the warrant if it's a mandatory state.
So the personnel plan does list the holidays. If anything, maybe we eliminate all the holidays and say, you know, per the state recommendation. I don't know, but I checked it out and the personnel plan does actually list out the holidays. So
No,
it seems
it's a
like
good
either we,
idea.
oh, go ahead, Paul.
It's a good idea to have the personnel bylaw and regulations reflect the reality so people can see what their holidays are. And many times we write contracts and so on, so you'll have the holidays that are set forth in the personnel bylaws of the town. And if we don't have any holidays listed there, it's not fair. It would change
Makes
existing contracts, so on and so
Okay.
on. So
That's right.
just should have our personnel rules, regulations, and bylaws reflect state law.
I mean, I'm fine with this. I definitely believe in concept to put in Juneteenth. And if we have to modify it in a town meeting, I think it's a no-brainer. Any other discussion?
Well,
All
if
right.
we're waiting for the language, maybe it's the same as the personnel thing. Maybe we wait till we have the final name and we, on these 2 articles, we just do it at the advisory hearing because we haven't seen what they're actually calling the holiday.
But this one should be straightforward. It's just like
Yeah.
adding, you
Yeah,
know,
no,
what I mean? The other
I'm
one
in
had
favor of
some gray. The other one had some gray. You know what I mean? The other one's like how, okay.
Jeannie says that is the actual name of the holiday.
Juneteenth?
In the text, or in the chat, Jeannie just wrote that is the actual name.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Wonder what they call July 4th.
I don't know. It's hot dog day. I don't know.
I mean, I'm fine with, personally, I'm fine with voting on this now because I think it's very just
Okay.
straightforward. It's very like, you know, you put it on or you don't put it on type of thing. The other one had a little bit of gray of like, you know, what we're actually modifying, but I'm okay with it. That's
All
what's
right,
going
then I move that we approve the addition of Juneteenth to the Personnel Administration Plan.
All right, do I have a second?
I second.
All right, all in favor, Jeff,
All right,
Marianne,
Aye.
and Paul?
Aye.
I might as well. Okay, very good. Now, I'd like to go back to Heidi and thank you, Heidi, for your patience on this about the capital stabilization fund. You had
Yes.
presented a very good presentation about our free cash and putting a capital stabilization fund. I had some questions, or do you want to continue what you were saying before?
I was just going to end that I would only fund this when free cash was available. It's not something that would be a routine guaranteed every year to have something in it. And then I think Dan Sickle is on here from advisory. I presented to them if you wanted any comment from advisory. He's available to.
Well, first I'll take questions because we have quite a few virtual hands raised. So first I'll take Jeff Waldron, please.
well, I think this is a great idea. You know, we've talked about this before, particularly town buildings where we don't always necessarily know what work a building's going to need. We might have a plan to look at a town building and we uncover more work than we thought. So the one question I have though, Heidi, is, and it's really more of a process. When we transferred money from the general stabilization fund to fund the tree work about 2 years ago, we needed a 2/3 vote to do that. So I'm wondering if this capital stabilization fund is set up, if it could hamstring us a little bit, if it requires a 2/3 vote to make a transfer to cover a planned expenditure, and how that would happen like mid-year or something like that.
Well, it's probably going to be a 2/3 vote, as it's a vote from the stabilization fund that is town meeting versus a free cash vote.
Right.
Yes. So that would be something, or is it that you, I don't know if there's a way to work around it to say you vote
Yeah.
a certain amount to be used.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. I'm just trying to think through the implications. That's all. I think it's a good, what you're proposing, and you did the benchmarking, which is really good, but I just want to make
And
sure
then
that
the
we
banks
sort of
close
don't
at
have
noon.
like unintended consequences, as they say.
Yeah. Paul, you had your hand raised next.
Yes, so I wrote one of these articles for another town about 3 weeks ago and listened to a presentation from the finance director. And he said that it was actually quite urgent to adopt this because the accounting profession and this rating agency, Standard & Poor's and outfits like that, are taking the position that any transfer from a town stabilization event becomes a reportable event and possibly is going to be classified as a default event. So if you've got your general stabilization limited because it will cause a reportable event, and you're going to have to be explaining to the rating agencies that you're not actually in default and it's not an emergency and all that kind of stuff, you're better off having a secondary stabilization account, which would have a different name, so it would not be a reportable event to take money out of that stabilization account. So I'm in favor, based on what I heard from that finance director, of having at least 2 stabilization accounts. So the general stabilization account, which is the one that's apparently being monitored statewide or by rating agencies or whoever owns our bonds, have a secondary account we can actually use for purchases and whatnot. So I'm in favor.
So there'd be a second stabilization account? I'm not sure I got that. I get the first one that has to be reported. Is the second one that doesn't have to be reported? Is that for smaller capital?
If it's a capital stabilization account, according to this finance director, based on his input from the town's auditors, it does not constitute a reportable event to transfer money out of that capital stabilization account.
All right. I'd
So
like
what
to sorry.
they're treating the general stabilization fund as sort of an emergency fund. And so if you have borrowed money from the town of Sherborn and we owe them, somebody pay back on these bonds, we have to notify them basically that we're in default on the bonds, or there's a risk to their investment. It has all kinds of ripple effects that are not good for the town. So that's really going to hamstring the use of general stabilization as sort of a savings account. So you need a secondary account that has a different name and capital stabilization account, according to the finance director who was telling me what telling the select board in another community. The accountants were saying that that's a safe place to put money for if you're actually going to be putting money in and taking money out to fund projects.
Well, can I ask a clarifying question, Eric? Because
Yeah.
it's related to Paul's point. I think that's a good point, but then I would simply ask, we already have the reserve fund where we take money, we set money aside out of the budget. You know, the advisory creates a reserve fund of around $300,000 a year for unforeseen expenditures. Why wouldn't we just continue to use that? Why do we need a capital stabilization fund? We would just, maybe we add another $25,000 or $50,000 to the reserve fund for unanticipated capital. Why do we want to have a separate one?
So I can answer that if you wanted me to answer it.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Sure.
So the problem with the reserve fund is there's no public process for vetting capital projects. So if somebody wants to build I don't know, an asphalt plant for the town to put in the middle of Jameson Field, going to the reserve fund and dealing with the advisory committee to get a transfer, there isn't the kind of public accountability. The point of this capital stabilization account is there is a town meeting vote, and it's a 2/3 vote, but typically in Sherborn, we have funded all these projects through debt, so there's a 2/3 vote anyway. So we wouldn't see any significant change from what has been the vote quantity in the past. But at least you have the voters involved in making the decision.
So they would approve individual projects that you couldn't have, I guess I'm asking, you couldn't have a capital project that was unforeseen come up mid-year and fund it from the capital stabilization fund. Is that what you're saying? Because the voters wouldn't have voted on that project.
Correct.
So it would have to fund projects that the voters have already approved.
It funds, it would be the same process that we do now. So project A, we have this list of capital projects. So project A, the source of funding would be a transfer from capital stabilization. If there's a crisis in the middle of the year, you do have to go to the reserve fund for that, to replace a boiler or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks for clarifying. That was good.
Let me hear from Courtney and then Mary Ann. Courtney, please.
I think it's actually Stephen.
Oh,
Yes, so this is Stephen Tsai, the chair of advisory. I'm just, it seems silly to also be logged in, even though I'm in the same room as Courtney. But I just wanted to let you know that this was discussed in advisory. Dan Sickle who, has been involved in it, but that advisory, of course, we haven't taken a formal vote yet because we won't do that till the public hearing, but informally, there's unanimous support from advisory for this article.
okay, very good. Mary Ann, please.
Yeah, I have a very different kind of informational question. Regarding the inflow into these accounts, the general stabilization versus capital stabilization, is there any guidance or rules governing how much money goes into each every year and where it comes from?
It traditionally has come from free cash.
Right,
with the
but
town votes.
The distribution between the two funds.
It'd be two separate votes, and it comes up going through what advisory looks at it, and then I'll come to select board and you decide. And that's why I was looking at our general stabilization account sits at about 2.5% right now, and we're trying to move that up to 3%. So the guidelines for DLS is that you want to be 3 to 5% in the general stabilization fund. So that's our target, is to get our rainy day fund growing to be at that level and then maintain it. So you would each year look down and say, what do we have for free cash? Maybe put 25 in the stabilization and 75 in capital stabilization. If you don't,
that makes sense. But all I'm asking is who makes that decision?
It would be advisory and select board.
All right.
Well, but no, it's on the warrant too, Heidi. The voters would have to vote any changes, right? The voters authorize it. It's a warrant article to add or remove money from the stabilization fund.
Right. But as far as who decides the amount of money to present to the voters, it goes through the process going to advisory and to select board. And
okay.
Right.
That's something I didn't appreciate initially. So it does go to town meeting, It does go through the two committees you just mentioned there.
Yeah.
So essentially, all it essentially does is almost act like free cash that goes through kind of that vetting process versus bonding and whatever else. I mean, in that sense, I definitely like it. My opinion is like it goes through a fair amount of public vetting. And with interest rates going up, I think it might be a certain advantage to it.
We do
Paul,
this for
you-
OPEB. We do the same thing for OPEB. You know, we
Okay,
fund
yeah.
a certain amount of money each year for OPEB to put into that fund also.
And one of the big advantages versus free cash every year is we know free cash kind of is a little nebulous. It's not exactly what we have in the bank. This is going to definitely show what amount of money we have physically in the bank that can pay for capital.
Mhm.
And it's,
Now, Paul, did you still have a question? You have your hand raised, or is that just left over from before?
That's left over.
I can lower it. I can lower it. That's fine. Marianne, you had something.
Mine's not left over. I'm still not quite clear. When you're putting money into the capital stabilization fund, you're looking for a certain percentage. But on the other hand, you may be looking ahead to capital expenses that are coming down the road. Maybe in the next 2, 3 years, you're planning ahead there. So I still don't have clear in my mind how the distribution of funds can anticipate that sort of thing. I guess, well, it's tricky. You would have to present it to town meeting with a rationale that looks ahead 2 or 3 or 5 years, or how would that happen exactly?
right. This, I envision this as this is a transition period that's going to take several years. For now, not much is going to change. We're still going to be doing free cash, borrowing. And, you know, and this may not be a source for the next 2 years to fund. It's going forward in probably year 3, 4, 5. We can look at this as a future funding source. So it's not a percentage. It's not quite in the equation yet. It's just building up a savings account that in the next few years, when budget, we don't have a lot of new growth coming in town. So this is something that I'm kind of saying, put this away, that it'll help us get another source of funding besides free cash and borrowing.
Yeah, I think the basic concept is really good.
Yeah, but we don't have a definite percentage. I mean, it doesn't say you should have so much percentage in a capital stabilization fund. There's no guideline set on that right now from DLS or anyone else that I've seen.
There's a good analogy though, and you probably know this, Heidi, is the regional schools have something they call the excess and deficiency fund, which they use to fund things that weren't anticipated also. So that is also it's not a set amount, but it's recommended for the same exact 3 to 5%. And they've actually, I think they've got about 1.5 million in that fund right now. So they know they've got some roofs to replace and other things. So the school has an excess and deficiency fund that operates the same way as this one does.
Well,
And the school, by the way, schools also have the ability to borrow independent of the towns.
That's right. That's right. Well, this seems to make sense to me. It does. And any concerns I had about public vetting are thought of. Is there any more discussion or motions relative to the stabilization fund?
Move approval.
Second.
All right. All in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Marianne,
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I am as well. All
Thank
right.
you.
And thank you very much, Heidi. Thank you. And thank you again for your patience as we move around. Next up will be Sean Colleen for 3 items: Verizon easement for library, Verizon easement for Village Way, Leland Drive, and release of right and interest the portion of Obed Lane. Is Sean on here? Oh, there he is. Yep.
He's here, yeah.
Would collapse Route 16 behind his back. Yeah.
Do you want me to share anything on the screen, Sean, or you got it?
If you have it, I mean,
I have what was in the packet we got.
I don't know what you had.
I don't know. Let me see what I got.
We had the text of the agreement, but no maps.
That's really boring.
Let's see, hang on. There you go back here. Hang on. Where
Does
am I?
anyone have maps? Actually, I was wishing I had a map of these easements.
I'm looking. Hang on. Which one are we looking here now? Let's see here. I have the Village Way one. Let me share my screen. This is the Village Way. Which one are we doing first? This
Yeah,
is
but
the
it's-
Village Way.
I mean, technically the library's listed first, but I don't think it matters, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's fine. But this is the library one, isn't it?
Well, it looks like you got all of them. You just rolled past the,
But this is the library one here. It says number 4.
Oh, that's.
Oh, no,
Obed
that's
Van
all right.
Deuel.
Hang on. Let's see, hang on. I didn't say I was good at driving. I have my learner's permit though.
There you go. There you go.
Is this the one you want, Enstar Electric? Where do you want me to go, Sean?
well,
Stay in one place for a minute.
what you have in there doesn't have the map. Because he did it as a different file.
It did for Leland, but I don't think it does for
And-
this one.
Leland Woodhaven, you mean?
Yeah,
That's the only one that really needs a map.
okay.
Sometimes they don't do it as the same file when they send it. I wish they would.
I
Yeah,
don't
It
think I
will be
got-
when it will be when you sign it, and we'll make sure it is in the actual warrant if it matters.
yeah. I don't see anything here that we,
Let's just talk through it then.
yeah, okay. Sorry.
Yep.
Because what we're giving them is an easement for the underground utilities that goes in Woodhaven, goes in Village Way and anywhere they're gonna place them in Woodhaven. There's already underground utilities there. They weren't doing that all the time back in the 80s. They do now. So we basically asked them to run fiber optic in there. They have to redo the conduits. It's a pretty great expense for them. And this is their right to ask for that easement so that they know that we're not gonna ask them, hey, just dig that stuff up and move it next year, would you? It matches exact wording of what was the temporary license that we gave them earlier, probably 3 months ago. You'll recall, because we wanted them to get underway with the work. So we're gonna basically rescind the temporary license and give them the permanent easement after town meeting.
And I'll say that I vehemently support this. Woodhaven, I've gotten complaints from residents of Woodhaven that there's no cable competition there, that they're locked into Comcast. Comcast treats them as a commercial client versus a residential client. And I fully support this. Any other discussion amongst the board?
I support it also, but I want it to be reviewed by town council, the language here. I'm just starting to review it now. I don't have time to do it, so.
It has. Amanda Zaretti was involved in this in review with Verizon. That review actually took place before we had you sign the temporary license.
Remember that.
But I think much like all the articles and the wording, she's going to be reviewing them. We can move right to the library one because it's very similar.
I'd like to take a quick vote just to do the support. I support it. I'd like to actually have the board support it as well. With any motions relative to Woodhaven, Leland Farm, Verizon easement?
Well, I'm in favor of doing it unless Paul wants to have it confirmed that the town council, I'm willing to vote on it and I support it, but if
I
Paul
do remember
wants-
Amanda actually reviewed the language of the whatever it was, the license. I remember that very well specifically. So
Yeah, if it's been reviewed by council and approved as to form, then I'm fine with supporting the article.
all right.
Okay, then I would move that we support the Verizon easement for Village Way, Leland Drive.
All right. In a second.
Second,
All right. All in favor, Jeff,
Hi,
Marianne,
aye.
Paul?
Aye, I'm trying to read it.
I am.
And
I
Sorry.
I would make the same motion of Verizon easement for the library.
mean, do you want to discuss it? Sean was about to discuss a little bit. Do you want to talk about more about it, Sean?
Yeah, it's very similar. We, again, had Verizon add Fios into the library as we're doing the construction. We did underground conduits under the road, which I actually laid along with the Eversource conduits, and then all the way into the building. And they just, it's the same thing, that the conduit's there for them, and they want to know that we're not going to ask them to pick it up and move it.
Yep. All right, Marianne, you had a question?
Yeah, my question was, it probably would have been completely solved by a map, which I didn't get. So Sean, are all of these conduits and work to be done under roads, or are there lines to be dug, say, from Sanger Street by some new route to the new library?
So they were actually already installed. It's both under the road and on the property of the library. The reason for the easement is because we left the road right away and went on to what would be essentially private property, or in this case, the public property. So they need the easement to ensure that we're not going to rip it back out. There's nothing new that's going to happen. It's already been installed. This is just their insurance that they're not going to be asked to remove it because we decided to tear the building down and move it 50 feet the other way or something.
Okay, that's great.
And this makes sense. I don't do anything to actually, further delays the library, so I'll definitely approve this.
Yeah, I would just say, when this is presented at town meeting, it should be in the presentation, it should be clarified that this is already in place. There's no new lines of digging going on Sanger Street or to the library. Residents won't have as clear a picture as you do, and it just should be clearly presented as to what's actually there.
Right. So we'll make sure that gets into the presentation with advisory, and I'm certain they will make sure that's in there right up too.
Good, thanks.
Right. Any motions relative to this?
I already made the motion, actually.
Oh, you did? You did? No, we have a motion from Jeff. Do I have a second? You absolutely did.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, Jeff?
All right.
Marianne?
Aye.
Paul?
I'm just wondering why there's only 4 select people signing this rather than 5.
Well,
Yeah. I thought a quorum, because I thought all you need is a quorum to almost sign anything, unless there's
Right,
some weird supermajority type thing, and even then we have that.
Well, what I'm looking at is it has myself, Jeff, George, and Eric, and it doesn't have Marion at all. So, Marion, you get a free walk on this one. So why?
No,
I'm just playing lawyer. I'm trying to read the documents.
I don't know. I'm gonna file a suit for.
Well, not only that, George isn't here, so he doesn't know what he's signing either.
You guys are responsible then, and it all goes south.
I thought George could either read minutes or watch this video and still has given signing authority, and I thought he could. In that sense, if any single member is done. I'm gonna say aye as well. I think it's just straightforward. And then the final one from Sean is releasing a rights title interest to a portion of Obed Lane.
So I never knew this existed. It's kind of funny. It predates a handful of things. If you guys want to look at a decent map, the plot plan doesn't really do it very well, which actually I know is in your packet because Jeff just went by it.
Do you want me to open it?
You can open that.
Yeah.
And then I have a screen that might be more interesting to share, but roll down to that. Most people aren't going to understand where this is.
Which one is
Very
this?
well.
Is that right there? The one
Yeah, right there. So that's 23 Lake Street. If you're looking down on it, to your left would be Dowse's Corner. If you travel down Lake Street.
Yeah.
To the right would be Elliott Street.
Okay.
So, and it shows Obed Lane there. And again, this is my backyard. I grew up here. Obed Lane connects between Lake Street and Butler Street. Most people don't know that, but it does. Yeah. There's a little piece there that shoots into 23 Lakes property, but then it ends. And it doesn't seem to make any sense, except that dog leg that keeps going up on the paper. I'm not sure, it probably is due northeast. That actually connects to another dog leg on another piece of property and loops out to Morse Road. So without doing a ton of research, I'm guessing this was part of the layout before Morse Road got built. And the intent was to make a loop instead of a cul-de-sac. It's completely useless now. There's another house behind it. So that there would be no way to connect all the properties. And there's certainly no reason that the town needs to extend Obed Lane into these people's yard. It actually looks like it's sitting under their driveway.
So I do have a question on this. Now I'll recognize Marianne in a second. Is the town's right an easement or in fee? Now, because I dealt with this in my other job, where actually, if it's in fee, are we obligated to like do the dispensing of property, blah blah blah, under 30B?
Yeah, an
That-
RFP.
what's that, Paul?
An RFP.
Yeah, yeah. I
Sell
did.
it.
So I dealt with this in my other job. We actually like had a had a road where discontinuing is just like this. It's essentially an extension that no one ever cared about or knew about. We got town meeting approval to dispense of it, but I think we're obligated to actually like bid it out, because it was essentially public property. It wasn't just an easement; just kind of goes away, and that was fine. So before I hear from Marianne, do you know, Sean, if this is an easement or if this is in fee?
I don't, but you can see the legal recording if he backs out or goes, go up a little bit on that screen, Jeff. Does it, oh no, I'm sorry, that's in your warrant.
I don't think there's anything unless it's further down.
Mm-mm.
So
No,
can we refer it to town council?
Yeah, we definitely should refer it.
I'd like to hear from Marianne because she has her hand raised.
Yeah, I know this area pretty well because from the Bay Circuit Trail, one can walk down Oped Lane to Morse Road. And then that's to Lake Street, sorry. Then there's there's a way to get to a public trail, but you have to go right on Morse Road for a distance, which is not very safe, on Lake Street for a distance, which is not very safe. So my question is that a potential route to allow a hiker or rider to cross Lake Street and get directly through these dog legs into the conservation land at the end of Morse Road?
Yeah, it's not.
It's not, potentially couldn't be done.
No, it's deceiving where it is when you look at that map. It doesn't even get you all the way back in 23 Lakes property, and then it actually bumps into the backyard of a Morse Road property, but doesn't get you anywhere. There's houses between it and where you're trying to get.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, like it from Paul. Yeah.
Not only do I want this to go to town council to determine what the right procedure is, but also I think we should run it by the Conservation Commission and the trails people to see if this has some potential for being a link on any trail or any conservation land or any other town land before we simply dispose of it.
Yeah, before I hear from Jeannie, I'd like to state that maybe this land acquisition is kind of a clearinghouse for all those committees. So I'd like to actually just, kick it to land acquisition. I certainly have no desire to have any interest in these people's driveway or anything else like that. I'd like to, turn it over. I'm just worried about the legal obligations because it is public. If it is public property and we actually have an interest in the fee, I think we're obligated to do certain requirements before dispensing of it. So that again, so going to town council, just like Paul indicated. Jeannie?
I live right next door, and the easement literally stops at the end of Lisa's driveway, and then her property continues on. It goes to other private. It's like Morse Road is all those pie-shaped lots, and they all go to a point. So basically, the easement on Lisa's property doesn't go to any trails. It just goes right to more private property. So it stops at the end of her driveway, even though her land continues on beyond the easement. She would like to have it removed. She's asked for it. There was a letter from her lawyer. Everything went to town council. Town council rewrote the language that's in the warrant right now. So we can send it back to them, but it literally goes nowhere to public property.
If it's an easement, I'm fine with just dispensing of it. That's easy. To me, at least my concern is if it's in fee. If the town owns it in fee, I think we're obligated to do certain requirements. I'm sorry, I mean breakfast. But if it's an easement, I think we just dispense of it and it goes to the underlying fee. Does anyone know if that has gone to town council to determine if it's an easement or a fee and make sure this language is appropriate? Does anyone know that for sure?
I don't know. I do know the town council wrote the language
Oh,
for the warrant article.
okay. I'm fine with it. That's the same council I used when I did my other project when I got rid of a roadway. So I'm actually,
When it does go to a town meeting or even to advisory, it would be nice to have a map that makes clear that that easement goes nowhere. So that the trails people, don't take up time by asking the same question that I just asked.
and frankly, even if it went to somewhere, if essentially it's an easement only, it's been effectively owned by this private property, I actually kind of respect the private property rights. So I'm actually fine with approving it as is, if town council has actually looked at the language. That's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has any further discussion on it.
Well, just I'm hesitating about that because the language for a warrant article to authorize the release of an easement doesn't, you don't change the language if it's a fee or easement. Where that becomes important is how do you dispose of it? So if you're disposing of an easement, you have one easier procedure. If you're disposing of land and fee, you have a more complicated procedure. That's not something that would necessarily have to be researched in order to be put into the article. So I still would like to know the answer to that question as to whether or not we own it in fee or not. And I'm still concerned that sometimes when we own stuff in fee, it may be the place where we want to be able to have some land to let stormwater run off the road, maybe put a detention pond or something like that. So because I don't know anything about this property, unfortunately I'm at a disadvantage because Jeannie knows it and Marion knows it. It's a total strange. I'm a total stranger to this particular setup. I do want to make sure that somebody who is responsible for municipal land issues takes a look at it.
All right. Maybe I kick this to Diane. Maybe I would like to bring this back before we have our other, meeting with advisory, because I think it's straightforward, but maybe if we could have a few questions answered by what is it? By town council and possibly even land acquisition. I don't know what your thoughts are, Diane, if we could bring this back to us.
I think you're muted. You're muted, Diane.
I can bring it back to the 24th meeting if we can get an answer from council.
Okay. Answer for council. And maybe get a little better map of it, and we can maybe make our own opinion as a, it's of use and so on like that. Because to me, this does seem straightforward, but I get the concerns. I definitely get the concerns.
Yeah, I'd like in a map to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
That's all.
Absolutely.
So there's in other communities where you have an easement or a right of way that goes nowhere. Instead of disposing of it, you enter into a swap agreement with the landowner where you move it to where it does connect. So sometimes when land has been subdivided, these things were laid out like 100 years ago. And rather than letting it go, what you do is if it's like 20 feet over on the left side of the property, but what you really needed is 20 feet on the right side of the property, you agree with the property owner to do a land swap and you put it where it should be now that the subdivision is in effect, so that it does have a purpose. So this, there's probably none of this is relevant. It's probably a very simple, straightforward thing. So it's just I'm in ignorance of all the details and want to have more information.
I think a bigger picture map, let's go. I suspect this is very straightforward. It's just rescinding an easement. But I think having a bigger picture map will help us out, definitely. All right, so we'll make no motion and no decision on this, sounds like. Up next is a citizen position for Rockwood Street maintenance from John Hargrave. I
Hey,
see a
thanks.
Jade Hargrave. I'm guessing it's the same. Oh, no, there's John. I'm sorry. I see a picture. There you go.
That's me, yeah. First of all, can I share screen? Is that okay?
Jeff, can you make him a co-host?
Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, so we're requesting the town of Sherborn to pave Rockwood Street from the intersection with North Main Street to the end at Dallas Orchards. And our goal is to make a permanently safe, passable road for residents and visitors. The road is currently unpaved. It degrades easily, especially after rains or inclement weather. And the reason we need to do it now is that increased development on Rockwood Street. We've had new houses as well as a lot of land clearing. It's made the water runoff and erosion much worse. And I'll just share a few photos with you here. So this is kind of what we see a lot here on our road. Let me just cycle through a few of these. Yeah, this is our road. So Rockwood Street is a Sherborn public road, services 6 residential homes, as well as Dallas Orchards, which is back here. And that, of course, sees heavy traffic during the fall apple picking and the Christmas tree season. And we're requesting a permanently smooth, drivable surface. The road requires proper drainage of standing water, widening in places to accommodate 2 vehicles, and an asphalt surface to minimize erosion, ensuring driver and pedestrian safety. I got to give thanks to Director Colleen and the Sherborn Highway Department for regularly repairing this road. I mean, they are out here constantly, week after week, patching this road, keeping it passable. We really appreciate their work. It's just hard to keep up with the new erosion. This is from the power lines that went in recently. So that whole area over here was widened, contributing to the erosion. And the good news is the town's going to save money over the long term in maintenance costs. The road is a priority. There's no alternate routes available to residents. We have to use this road. So it's time. It's finally time. It's time for us to make the good investment to pave Rockwood Street. These are just cars trying to pass on Rockwood Street. This is a quick look at some of the traffic that we get during the fall apple picking season. So yeah, we're requesting to make it a permanently safe, passable road for residents and visitors.
All right. Any thoughts on the board?
Can we hear from Sean Colleen?
If he wants to talk about it, sure.
I mean, like, what's involved? How much is going to cost? Where's the funding coming from?
I can speculate on involvement or what it'll take, but you can't ask me what it's going to cost. I haven't been asked to cost it out. Paving Rockwood Street wouldn't be a very difficult task. We pretty much redo the base every year. The issue with Rockwood Street, and John could go back and show you what you can remark on is in those pictures is the water. I assume everyone's driven down Rockwood Street before. Most probably haven't in the winter. There's a ton of water coming off that hill, and it has some drainage ditches there, which is a challenge. It's not the only road in town that has water coming at it in the winter. There's some paved roads that are plagued with it too, that, you know, you just create ice all winter long. Russet Hill's been doing it for the past month. So I'm guessing and speculating that we would spend as much money on the drainage. And when I say drainage, I don't mean catch basins. I mean stopping the water from traveling under and over the road to make a good base for a road so it can last. We do spend a lot of time up there in the course of a year. So I'm not adverse to doing it. I wouldn't mind doing Green Lane either. Those would be good projects, but there's no funding source right now for it.
And that was my first question. So is there a cost estimate? Is this a capital, or is this just a kind of a article which says we're going to pave it? Or is there an actual, it seems like there should be a capital request. It should go hand in hand with a capital request with a cost estimate in there. In other communities I've worked for, sometimes these go hand in hand with a betterment. Where actually, you actually put the financial burden on the actual butters based on their linear footage or their frontage and so on like that. Because it's a pre-existing, no different than a water sewer line. I don't know if any other thoughts from the board. And also, I do want to say that I'm guessing that the total area of this lane is probably greater than 1 acre, would trigger actually a NIPD's requirement. And we are, as we all know, in the Charles River watershed, and actually would probably trigger additional phosphorus removal and so on like that. Yeah, Marianne?
Right. Sean is right. It's more than just paving the road. I mean, there are huge drainage issues there. Courtney can probably speak to it better than I, but that road receives drainage from the entire backside of Peters Hill. And there's been some new construction in there that looks to me like it wasn't done very environmentally well. Big piles of dirt. I mean, it's really kind of a disaster in there right now, and it's all draining down the hill into a wetland. It's a big stormwater problem, actually. So I would guess that the stormwater management is going to be at least as expensive as the road itself. And I think Sean is right. You need a kind of major infrastructure there to deal with it. But right now, it's just running over the road and down the hill.
I think it's regulatorily required because you're going to disturb more than 1 acre. And it's going to actually be required under our NIPD's permanent and our bylaw to actually do mitigation, which means recharge and treatment and so on like that. As soon as you pay, as soon as you touch it, it's actually going to trigger that. I don't know.
We spent 1.5 million paving the Pine Hill Access Road, which is shorter than this distance in my view, and had some water issues too, but not to this magnitude. But that was 1.5 million. So I'm sure it's at a minimum 1.5 million.
I know many years ago, it was probably like 6, 7, 8 years ago. I lose track of time because I'm old. The place I work for actually had estimated that to do a full reconstruction, base and so on like that, is about $1 million per lane mile. So I don't mind this in some ways in concept. So I get the maintenance of this. I guess it's weird that we have unpaved roads in town. But I'd like to see more of a cost analysis, and before we actually just say, yeah, let's do it in concept. What's it actually going to cost, and what is our stormwater management requirements? If it's more than 1 acre, we are triggered to require it, and we are triggered to treat it. I mean, and it's not back in the old days. You just pave a road. That's why a lot of our roads are falling apart, because we kind of did that. Is the base good? Is it not good? I have just some questions myself. Marianne?
Yeah, this is a question for Eric and Paul, really. This road, it seems to me, would qualify for state funding through one of those programs, TIP or something else. Of course, there's a big backlog of projects there, and it's a lot of work to get that money, but I can't see the town being able to do this anytime soon on its own dime. So, but it looks like ripe for grant money from somewhere.
TIP it wouldn't, only because TIP has to be regional. So it's corridors, it's significant intersections, you know what I mean? Although a lot of people I know buy Christmas trees up there. Maybe you can make an argument of that. But in reality, the Massachusetts, the MPO is not going to look fondly upon this. I mean, Chapter 90, maybe it contributes to our Chapter 90 fund, but it basically use our entire years, if not more, of Chapter 90. We wouldn't resurface or, chip seal an entire road, to pave this pre-existing unpaved road. So I was like, safe streets, complete streets and stuff like that. I can't imagine it would trigger any of those, grant requirements for those. I don't know.
Is there something that could be done about the drainage, at least? It's
I don't
water
know.
that's causing the problem on the road.
So EPA, what's it called? 316 grants can't be used to actually meet permit requirements. So if you do enough work, it actually triggers an NIPD's permit, and you actually cannot use, that actually precludes you from using certain grant funds, because it's assumed that communities will need to adhere to permit requirements. You can't use grants to do permit requirements. I don't know. I mean, I don't mind the concept looking at it, but I think a lot of homework needs to be done. What's it going to cost? What's our actual permit requirements on this? As far as our MS4 permit, and then once this gets done, do we burn like our entire, we burn 1 million for every single, what have we got? 3 unpaved roads, Sean? We have Cross Street, Green Lane, and this.
I am unmuted. Yeah, and I mean, Cross Street doesn't really get used, so other than what goes to the first house. Yeah, Green Lane's a little different animal. It's much, much, much longer. That you'd actually get opposition to wanting to pave it from at least half the residents up there.
So could I suggest on this one that we defer action right now? Let's ask Sean to give us some kind of cost estimate, engineering obligations, what it would be involved in this, get us a fuller picture of what's involved. I agree with the article proponent that having a paved road, particularly in New England and with snow and all of that, you want to have a paved road, and very much am motivated to try and accomplish that. But let's see what we're involved with, this request, what the details are. I don't think we're in a position to take a vote on this at this point.
Well,
All right.
I want to ask a clarifying question, Paul. This would cost money to analyze the road and the water usage. Are we saying, first of all, that's not what the article is. We don't have an article to approve an engineering analysis of the road and the drainage and everything. But if you're saying we should authorize that, I'm not sure I'm in favor of that. First of all, we have one person here from that road, not 5 other people that live there. And second of all, certainly when they bought the house, they knew the condition of the road. So I'm not sure the town wants to pay for a road for 6 people. So it may seem harsh, but if we have to do an engineering analysis, it's, is it going to be $50,000-$60,000 to analyze the water flow and to analyze the geometry of the road and everything else? Is that what we're saying?
Well, Eric mentioned the idea of a betterment. Where the betterment's work is that.
Did Paul cut out just for me or everyone else?
No, he froze.
He's fading a little bit.
End up paying for it.
Well, that's after the fact. We would have to pay for it now.
So what my gut tells me is a cost estimate to do the road, to pave the road would be minimal. The water analysis would be significant. And just I think there would be actually on that there. You could do a simple, and I'll recognize you in John's in a second. You could do a simple, does it trigger NIPD's requirements? You could do that for probably short money. Does it trigger the MS4 requirements? And does it actually trigger treatment? If it does, I think that's a different story. I do. You don't have to do a full design. You don't have to do a detention ponds or whatever else, but you could actually do, does this trigger MS4? And does it actually trigger treatment requirements? And to me, that does change the story. It does once you do this. John, go ahead.
So respectfully, it seems that the arguments boil down to it's hard. It's hard. Now, we started working on this back in 2013. I originally spoke with Ed Wagner. He gave it a cost estimate just off the cuff of $200,000. But the truth is nobody knows, right? Nobody knows what the price is. So any numbers we're all throwing out at this point are theoretical. They're based on guesses. And, we, first of all, would help to have some real numbers. But second, every time we bring this up, it gets kicked down the road a little further. Sherborn, Rockwood Street has never been paid. There've been residents on the street that have been, asking for this for far longer than we have. So it's time. It's time because the erosion at this point is untenable. The new development and all of the lot clearing that's happening, as well as all the work on the power lines there, are washing out this road. We need a drivable, passable road. There's no other road. There's no other way to get to our home. You have signatures from the majority of residents now on Rockwood Street. And at this point, we need to do this. We can't push this further down the road anymore, so to speak.
All right, understand. I do want to just refute that a little bit. I think it's not just it's hard, it's expensive, and it's unknown, and it's pre-existing. I think those are really the arguments where each abutter did purchase those knowing it was an unpaved road, knowing the pre-existing conditions. It's expensive. It would chew up basically our entire roadway budget, some year, and it's unknown. I mean, I deal with road construction day to day. I've been doing it for 20 years almost. And it's not like the old days. You can't just tar a road. You just can't do that. It's just, we're in a regulatory environment right now where things are trickier, and it gets harder every time. In 2018, the EPA put the MS4 requirements onto 251 communities in Massachusetts, and right off the gun there, now all of a sudden it's not just paving a road; it is different. So I do want to clarify that. Marianne, please go ahead.
All right. All that said, and of course you're right, and I would always defer to Eric and Sean and others on this, but I'm really sympathetic to their situation on Rockwood Road. And rather than just dismissing this out of hand again, I think that I'd like to say that we're in favor of finding a solution that makes the drainage not only legal, but workable on Rockwood Road, the pavement if needed. And I don't think we have the answer yet. And we don't have all the information yet. For example, if MS4 regulations kick in here, Eric, you can tell me, then we have to do something, right, about the stormwater situation.
It's kind of the opposite. MS4 would actually prefer if you leave it unpaved. It is. So once you construct it, once you do the work and you trigger more than an acre, now you have to do something. It's almost like a ADA or the Mass Architectural Board for handicap requirements.
Yeah, I get that, but the fact that the road is there and it's driven on and it's plowed, etc., that is a disturbance of more than 1 acre. So why would not some component of the MS4 law kick in here?
Because it's maintenance, not construction. There's differences in the MS4. It does recognize maintenance different than construction. I know the city of Waltham has a certain city ordinance where major road reconstruction on private right-of-ways, which is different than this, is a public right-of-way, is actually done 85% by the community and 85%, 15% by the abutters. Maybe we look at some division as far as like betterments on this here. My only hang up is the stormwater and pre-existing. So every single person that owns that bought a house on that road knew it was an unpaved road when they bought it. So how much do you put the burden on to the taxpayers to actually say like, okay, we're going to improve these properties. We're going to improve these 6 private properties on behalf of the taxpayer. I think the major arguments for it is actually public safety. I bet you if we had Zach or Chief Galvin in here, they would say, yeah, we can actually get to an emergency 911 call these roads better if it's paved. I believe it's a genesis. If you look at it right now, our zoning bylaws says any driveway over 500 feet must be paved. And I think that's a genesis of that. But I just have I'm not looking to make this like the general court. We kick something to the committee just to make it die. And as much as I appreciate Jeff's thing, maybe use short public funds, not to exceed $5,000, to maybe look at a cost estimate and what our regulatory requirements are here, and possibly an analysis on some kind of betterments. That's what I'm thinking. I don't see this board, unless I'm wrong, approving kind of a blanket citizen position and please improve my property. That's kind of what we have here. It really is. But we also do have a burden of a borderline unsafe public road.
I think we should look for a way to recognize the problem and commit to some kind of process to analyze and figure out a long-term solution, because it's true that people bought it the way it was, but that's the way it was. And now, the power lines have come in, there's new construction that has not been done very responsibly. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'd hate to see it just be dropped and and the people on Rockwood told to go away, even all of them signed this petition.
Um,
The only thing is, this is a citizen's petition. It's not like we have a proposal from the DPW to do an engineering analysis or a
Yeah.
scoping study. All we're doing is reviewing a warrant article that's been proposed and presumably has the signatures to get it on the warrant. So we're not modifying someone else's petition, I don't think.
No,
and I
that's-
know that to do a property cost estimate, you got to do cores to look at, I don't know if Sean's still here, if any idea what the base looks like. You know what I mean? Is the base actually good material? Is it constantly making potholes? Is it silt? Is it clay in it? You know, you put pavement over that, you're throwing good money after bad. I don't know. I'm torn by this, and I understand the proponents, John's concern on this. I do understand it, and I respect public safety, but I can't just I don't feel good about just authorizing a citizen petition that's going to obligate the community to maybe over $1 million of fiscal obligation. Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
Yeah, Paul?
so I agree with Marion on this. I don't want to just dismiss this out of hand. I want more information. I don't want to make it into a huge federal project and spend a lot of money on engineering and so on, but I need more information than what's on the table here as to what actually is involved. And so, Eric, you had indicated at one point 5 minutes ago that some quick and dirty stuff can be done. Is it going to trigger this? Is it going to trigger that? What's the ballpark for things? If we can get a little more information, we can make a better decision. I would like to try and help these residents if we can. And while it's true that if we did a betterment, we'd have to advance the money and look to trying to get some reimbursement over 20 years from the neighbors. It still is better to work with the neighbors and trying to come up with a solution that works for them. The betterment doesn't have to be 100%. We can share the cost. We can invest in our residents. I'm willing to do that, but I don't know, without more detail, I don't know what's involved. So I can't vote on it one way or the other now. And I literally mean one way or the other. I wouldn't say no action, and I wouldn't say, let's go do it. I just need more information.
I'm actually comfortable voting on a small fee. You may like $5,000 to take a look at this. Taking just a cost estimate, engineering look on if it triggers the NIPT MS4 requirements. And what was the fourth thing? And maybe look at the base material, which would kind of go the cost thing. I don't know, Sean, if you have any thoughts on that, you know, putting a reasonable amount in it. I do feel we're obligated to make an opinion on the citizen petition itself, though. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but first, if Sean, if you have an opinion on to, you know, if we could do some just basic core look at this, just to give some idea if, you know, we're going down a bad road or not.
My only concern is timing. There's not a whole lot we can look at while it's frozen solid. I can reach out. I mean, we have firms that we're already under contract with to working on other things, so we can try and get those answers. Getting the answers may just lead to more questions. But if the board directs me to work on it, I can start working on it. I can't guarantee we're going to get a good hard number, but I won't even venture a guess right now. Many times you asked me. Again, we can come back and tell you exactly what it costs to put 4.5 inches of asphalt down, or, you know, similar to Pleasant Street, put 3 down with double chip or something. But the drainage is kind of an unknown. The water's a difficult one. That's why it was actually almost easier to work on Green Lane back when Gary did pre-ed. They rebuilt Green Lane. It was a little more straightforward. Rockwood's it's a tough one.
I mean, I appreciate Jeff's concern about, but I do think there's some obligation as a public road. It's one thing if there's a private road, but it's not. It's a public road. So I'm fine with allocating, you know, some funds to look at it and kind of make a more, I think an article of this substance where, this obligation should come from DPW and the select board. It shouldn't be a citizen's position. That's my thought on it.
Well,
Any other
except
thoughts?
that if we want to do a study, it has to be, it's not from this article. That's not in the article. The article's already set. So it has to be Sean's budget being amended.
Yep. Our use of free cash, which I would support up to about.
Well, funding is afterwards, but he has to submit probably an operating expense request in his budget for engineering analysis. It
Yep.
wouldn't be part of this article.
No. Or it'd be this board just allocating free cash or whatever he hasn't consulted.
Well, it's his budget. It'd be managed by his budget.
Yep, exactly. All right.
So-
do we want to take a vote on this article in of itself?
So I can support what you just said, Eric, up to $5,000. Take a look at this for the benefit of the residents. I agree with you that this is a public road. We have an obligation. And I want to take care of the residents of the town. So $5,000 seems reasonable. I would support, I'd move that we further investigate this article to the extent of $5,000.
Do I have a second on that?
We have a comment from Courtney in the chat. Courtney, do you want to unmute and tell us your comment? It might be Sean. I mean, it might be Steve.
Are you guys just taking a chance that it might be Steve? Because
They're switching computers.
Yeah. And no, I was just curious because it seems like Mr. Hargrave is bringing up a lot of questions about runoff and erosion. And I don't know if there's some kind of building issue there, if people are not, have appropriate erosion controls. I don't recall if those projects fell under conservation jurisdiction. I don't, it doesn't ring a bell, but it just seems like if there's something exacerbating the situation, at the very least, especially if it's due to poor building practices, maybe that is a temporary thing that we can get started on. Has anyone looked at that?
If it triggers stormwater, and I gotta really look at the bylaw, even if it's outside a resource area, it still triggers stormwater. Do you know what I mean? So a conservation, I believe, would look at if it's within a resource area. If it's not within a resource area, and that's a good question. I can't remember if it'd be building under the selectmen or not, but it still would trigger treatment requirements. It's more than an acre, and it's on the obligation of the town. And I don't know if it's in a resource area or not. So it's a good question, but I'm not sure. And I think maybe that's what the $5,000 goes toward.
Yeah, and I mean, if somebody is at least aware of, because like even if the project happened, say somebody built a new cleared a lot and built a house, and that was outside of jurisdiction, like we never would have had any oversight over that. But if as a result of that, now there's silt flowing down the hill and into a wetland, then we can do something about that because it's affecting a wetland now, even though the activity was outside of jurisdiction. So, if anybody has information about that kind of stuff, feel free to reach out to the conservation agent.
That's a good point. That'll definitely be part of the what I call the short study. Jeff, did you have something?
Well, only that we can't vote on this article because we don't have enough information. An engineering study is not in the article. We can cause Sean to submit to his budget an engineering study. I would be shocked if we could get enough information from $5,000 based on all the work we've been doing on other projects in town. We don't even know whether $5,000 is a proper amount to do the level of assessment we need. I don't know what is the right amount, but that is not in this article. This article is just to pave the road, and it's been signed and added to the warrant in that form.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the point is, I'm not opposed to doing an engineering study. I think it's worthwhile. And it's not that I'm completely unsympathetic to the abutters, but it needs to be in Sean's operating budget to do an assessment of this. And I don't think we should vote on a dollar amount because we have no idea how much money it would take. Someone said 5,000. I don't think you begin to get an assessment of the water here for $5,000 and, or even the regulatory requirements you mentioned. So, but this article is simply to pave the road and
Yeah.
it's already fixed.
I do feel as though we need to make a vote on the article itself. People might disagree because it's a much bigger question there, but the article is straightforward. It is before us. I don't support the article as it is. I do think we have an obligation, and maybe that's not within the purview of this agenda even. But the article, you know, I think it opens a can of worms where like anyone that wants to improve the property is going to put before us, you know, some article for their own, you know, infrastructure in front of the road. Marion?
Well, I would just want to clarify for my own understanding. This article is written a certain way, but in a way, aren't we still still at the placeholder stage? That is, if are we beyond that? Because we are still changing the wording of articles, and people are coming back with a better written article later by the time we get to the joint meeting. Could we give them a chance to rewrite this in a way that we can support the concept of looking into it and over the long term pursuing a solution? I mean, over the long term, something's got to be done about this road. So I agree that, you know, $5,000 isn't going to get us much, and we don't know what we're asking for there in terms of work. So, my question is, can this be rewritten in a way that we could support it in concept?
Honestly, I think an article of this magnitude, when it costs this magnitude, needs to come from the select board and not a citizen petition. That's my thought on it. Citizen petitions, you know, they kind of are what they are. And in this year, unprecedented, we actually offered legal support for those that were actually submitted in December, if they made a certain deadline. But I think a citizen's petition, for something that obligates almost $1 million of public funds in general, it has a huge threshold to make. I can't imagine how this could be rewritten such that you'd get, you know, select board and even town support. I think something like this really needs to come from the select board. Select board needs to actually make a decision. Is this warranted? Is it not warranted? And take a real look at it. Versus just, you know, 6 citizens saying, or less or whatever, saying I want to improve my property. So I don't see this going back to committee. I want to recognize John and then Paul. So John, go ahead.
So I understand the point of order. Is this required to be approved by the select board before it can go before the town meeting?
No. Any citizen petition can go before town meeting. Absolutely.
Right, so
This meeting is just to get buy-in from the board, really. You know, we report our vote. So select board will report the vote to advisory and the town meeting and how we feel on the article. But please go ahead. You had something else?
Well, I think I appreciate the support that you guys have given, showing that it's a public road, showing that, you know, we are the majority of residents want this done, and also talking about the erosion issues, which, as I've said, are significantly worse than they've ever been in the 10 years we've been working on this. That said, we need the road paved. What we're asking for is not a survey to see how much it's going to cost. We're asking to pave the road so that we have a passable road. Again, it's the only way we can get to our homes. It's a one-way street, a dead end rather, so that we have to use this road to get to our homes. And we spend a lot of money on maintenance. We will save money over the long term by paving it.
All right. Yeah, Paul.
So I could suggest that the select board, put an article on the warrant to take a serious look at Rockwood and to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds or borrow pursuant to the applicable statute a sum of money to do so. That would be a select board article, so it meets your standard, Eric, that you just articulated. It would address the concern that it puts before the voters whether or not they should want to spend any money on this. And it allows the article proponents a better article and a better opportunity to present their case to town meeting. So it would inform us this year as to what's involved with this article. And then if we want to go forward with paving, then we include it in an article for next year. So it'd be a two-step process. But why not put a article on the warrant now? Open the warrant, put a select board article on to do some investigation of this.
Yeah, I could definitely support that. I really could. I do think we have an obligation being a public road. It meets a certain industry standard there. I have a scope. I've been thinking about it. And I have a scope that I think we could write up on it. It'd probably be a little over $10,000. That's my gut would tell me. I don't know. Are there any other thoughts? Well, to be on the 24th, open and close the warrant to put an article to basically do a study and preliminary design.
Yes,
Mhm.
Okay.
I'd support that. And based on what I'm hearing, a cold vote telling the citizens, go away, you're done. That's not, doesn't feel right to me at all.
And put it before town meeting as well. Get a litmus test, because for 5 minutes there, I'm going to keep this unspoken. I'll speak what I was unspeaking. I was thinking I was using ARPA funds for this, believe it or not. I'll probably get flack for that for the next year if I do that.
Well, there's also that big $1 trillion infrastructure act that they're still trying to implement. So there should be a lot of federal funds that are hopefully going to flood into Massachusetts. And I've heard some really big numbers, like billions of dollars that are coming to Massachusetts. And maybe somewhere in there, we can figure out a way to get some of that for Sherborn that might relieve pressure on other parts of the budget. Maybe we can free up some money for this.
I want to
So-
caution. Oh, sorry.
So I think if we fix the warrant, because that's really what this meeting is about, is addressing the warrant. We haven't signed the warrant yet. If we fix the warrant, put an article on there that allows some forward progress on this issue. Keeps our
I
options
thought I
open.
had to pay for it.
Oh, right, okay.
I thought you said they sent.
Hey,
it to
Diane,
me.
you got to mute yourself. Anyways,
I got it.
I want to caution over optimism on these federal funds. I was just today yesterday in a MMA subcommittee with your friend Jim Lovejoy, and so little of those funds are going to hit the what do you call it? The local entities. It's a vast amount of those federal funds are going to be sucked up by the state, and then they're going to go into select grant mechanisms. Nothing is proposed to go into Chapter 90. It's so disappointing, but nothing is proposed to go into Chapter 90, which is allowed by right by communities to do roadway improvements. It's going to someone's going to go to MVP, which will be good. Someone's going to complete streets, and some will go to what is it? SRF, a few other grant mechanisms for loan relief. But almost nothing is going to make it, by right to the local community. So I do want to caution a certain level of, over optimism there. I really do. The states are just going to, or at least Massachusetts is going to suck it up into their own needs. I don't word it any other way. Sean, go ahead.
I am unmuted. I was just going to ask if we could not open and close the warrant today and throw this on there, but maybe in the next meeting, so we can just give me a little bit of time to write up what we're looking for.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. In fact, I don't think we can. It wasn't on the agenda, so I think you have to have some agenda requirements for opening and closing a warrant. So yeah, I was definitely planning on the 24th.
I think if you open the warrant, people should have a chance, because I don't think it's the only article somebody's trying to either change or add to. So.
We allow ones that are administrative, especially on a select board. We allow some non-substantive, just like stylistic changes or whatever. I don't see any way the way this is worded that it would pass in concept. John, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, so I understand the point of order. So you're proposing taking the warrant that we have proposed and amending it to essentially be a research of, let's say, up to 10,000 or hopefully more to estimate the cost for paving Rockwood Street. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, costs and requirements on it.
No.
And I want to say it's not modifying it, would actually make a new article. It'd be a selectman's article, standalone, so it wouldn't be article at all. It just to do the study.
I understand.
Your article, I still think we should vote on your article, and it might not be a positive vote, but so it would not be modifying it. Essentially, a citizen position. It is what it is as it's submitted.
Now, so let's say the citizens petition passes as is,
Yeah.
which agreed, there's no cost in there. It's short on details, totally understood. We're not experts on paving roads. So what happens then? Is that in anyone's best interest for it to pass with the wording that it has currently? I'm trying to play that through. Or might we be better going and taking some of the free legal help that you mentioned to tighten up our own warrant?
I mean, the deadline is passed. I'm cautious onto submitting kind of legal help with this. To me, I don't see, and maybe I'm wrong, the select board, what do you call it, backing this or voting for this as not only has this worded, but even in concept. You know, I see the select board, and I'm willing to take a vote on this, you know, doing a separate warrant article to basically take a real look at this road, to do a study on this road. But the citizen petition, it is what it is. So the wording is what it is right now. And you could tweak like 1 or 2 words maybe at town meeting itself. But I think it's just so far out there. Do you know what I mean? It's just so like, I don't know. If to answer your question, if it does pass, it passes, it passes. It is, you know, any citizen petition. You get and I don't think it's even a capital items. All you need is a majority of town meeting on this. You know what I mean?
But what would happen from there? In other words, how would we find the funds, for example?
So if I could, Eric, these votes at town meeting are legislative votes, they're authorizations, but actually the select board does not have to spend money, does not have to implement things. So it could very well be that the article would pass. Let's say it passes unanimously. That doesn't mean the select board would do anything other than what we're already talking about, which is let's investigate what the cost is and its feasibility and all that kind of stuff and what's involved. So I don't see that you gain anything by having your article passed per se. I think we're all in favor of having the road paved. Is it sort of a generic thing? It sounds like a good idea. It's the cost and the ways and means of doing it that have to be solved.
Yeah, good point. Very good point there. Mary Ann, you had your hand raised.
I'm looking for clarification here. Maybe Paul and Eric can help. Because this has been submitted as a citizen's petition, does it have to go before town meeting as written?
Yes.
So that's going to be done. So then we need an additional select board article to propose some funding to take the first step on this.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm proposing that. Also, go ahead, Paul.
And then the rest of my question is, who's going to write the select board article?
So the idea would be to say to the residents and to the voters, look, take no action on the citizen article and instead vote for the select board article so that we are able to figure out what's involved here. It's sort of a look before you leap argument to be made to town meeting. So we'd ask the article proponents not to push their article and instead let us go forward with our alternate solution and see where that goes.
Yep. And so basically what we're proposing is on the 24th, just open and close the warrant, you know, put in an article to basically study this. Sean said he could do a little bit of homework, maybe get some idea of the cost to study this. Like I'm thinking like, you know, a few cores, some civic analysis, what basic NIPTES requirements there are, and fundamental cost estimate, as well as what our maintenance costs are in the long run. I definitely want to take a look at what the town's maintenance costs are of this unpaved road versus a paved road. I think it's very critical to this as well. That's my thoughts on it. And I'm basically saying that to Sean. So come before us on the 24th or something like that.
You know, I
Jeff,
wonder,
sorry.
is it worth thinking about authorizing or assigning to some group or committee or person in town to pursue grant funding for this project, or to do the footwork that it takes to understand what our potential is for grant funding?
We could
That
definitely
would-
have, like, I think Gino would probably be the best person to take a look at it. Gino and, with Sean and Addie's help, and to get an idea. I'm just telling you that I know this type of grant stuff, and I'm not trying to be a naysayer. I just think a dead end road for 6 things, it doesn't make complete streets. It doesn't make safe routes to schools. It doesn't make tip. It's not a corridor. All those other things that kind of trigger grants, and then if you touch it, it's an MS4 requirement. Grants almost never actually fulfill regulatory obligations. I'm not trying to be a naysayer, but I think we can take a look at it. I just want to, just like what Paul said about the federal funds, I want to caution people on being over optimistic. We can look at it. I'm just telling you that I deal with this world a little bit. I just caution people on being over optimistic. Paving a dead end road doesn't trigger any public interest. It just doesn't on a global sense. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of doing this, the engineering assessment. I wonder why we need a warrant article. If you want to raise awareness of the issue by having a $10,000 or whatever it ends up being, from my perspective, we don't even have to have it on the warrant. Why don't we can do a reserve fund transfer and authorize Sean to do this study right now and not have to wait until July 1st to start doing the work. We could study it right away with a $10,000 transfer. The problem, and I'm fine with doing it either way, the problem is, what if the citizens see it, let's say hypothetically it's $10,000 to do an engineering assessment, and they're worried that they're gonna have to pave a road. What if the citizens vote against doing the engineering assessment because they see it implying major costs? Why don't we just authorize the study to be done in this current year and do a reserve fund transfer? It would help John's case because it would get it done, the study done, 3 or 4 months sooner than if we had to wait to town meeting and then wait till the July 1st start of the budget year. And we would then prevent people from voting against it because they wouldn't have to see it. Then once we have the data, then we can propose something that is a bigger term project next year.
I was thinking the same thing.
Either way would work, but it shouldn't be a separate article, in my opinion. If we decide you want it it should just be in Sean's budget. We do studies on all kinds of things around town, culverts, and we've done a lot of things. Unless you want the publicity for it, there's really no need to have a special article, $10,000 to do an engineering assessment.
And I was thinking the same thing. And one of my concerns is that advisory is very cautious. They almost take everything to a capital. You know what I mean? Like that's how, the Council of the Aging or whatever was the senior center study. They went against my recommendation to do out of retained earnings, and they actually are under free cash, and they had decided to bond it. If they decide to bond this, let's say it's even $15,000, you'll need 2/3, and that is a big, that's a big threshold to make. You know what I mean? It's very tough to make the 2/3 threshold. There are actually 3 mechanisms. As much as I joke around, you actually could use ARPA funding. I think something like this might be appropriate for ARPA funding. Free cash, or even Chapter 90 on any one of these. And I would support any one of those, to be honest with you. I'd actually more like to support ARPA or free cash in Chapter 90, to be honest. I don't know, Paul, your hand is still raised. Is that left over from before? If it is, okay, I'm going to recognize John.
Thank you. So I would suggest we get that research done before town meeting, because obviously we all want what's best for the town. My concern is, in absence of any data on what this will actually cost, that could then perhaps, people are voting essentially on something without information, just as we're all talking right now, and something without a nature, knowledge of the nature of the true cost. So is that possible to get that done before then? So we could then, you could have that in your recommendation, either for or against the warrant.
The only thing is, I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be tough to get it done because I deal with these studies, particularly when the road is wet and you're taking core samples. There's a little. I just want to again caution over optimism on this. I'm not sure we could complete the study by town meeting. To be honest with you, we could try, but I just want to caution over optimism on this.
Well, one clarification, it's not just by town meeting. We have an advisory public hearing on March 26th. So it's not you're not gonna have the study when
Yeah.
advisory votes on whether to support or recommend no action on the article.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, John, go ahead.
So if you guys generously put aside some of Director Killeen's budget to investigate this, then that's good. We're making progress. But if that information is still not complete, I'm curious. I'm just thinking through how you're going to word your response to this warrant, either for or against. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and think about how are you going to frame that for the Sherborn community.
I'll speak for me personally. I don't see myself voting for this article as it's written, even in concept. I don't. I think in the long run, to make it done, but it's a citizen petition for public, indirect public funds, for property interests. I personally need more information. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak, or I don't know. Does anyone want to make a motion on this actual article itself? If anyone wants to actually make a motion to approve or disapprove this article itself, support or not support this article. I mean,
I'd like to push that over to the February 24th.
What's that?
I'm not prepared to take a vote today.
Okay.
I want to push it over to February 24th, and in between, maybe Sean said he's going to take a look at it. Maybe he can give us some more information. Maybe we can get more information from any source at all that's out there, like available funds. The idea of that Jeff had of let's find $10,000 from a budget. I am very reluctant to tell Sean to use $10,000 with his budget when I have no idea where he is on his budget, and I wouldn't want to do that without getting feedback from him and having him a chance to think about it. And the same thing with any other budget. So I'm not prepared to take any action today. I think we've had a robust discussion. I'd like to see more information from staff and departments on this.
Yeah, I mean, I would support that as well. I'd like to get at least a proposal or something. We get some kind of like estimate of what a study would cost. It's going to be probably over 10 because I'm asking for core samples. I don't know if Sean disagrees or wants something else, but I would probably want to see a few core samples to get an idea of the base material there, and the sieve analysis. Yeah, I agree with waiting until the 24th. John, and then Marianne after that. You're muted.
My hand was still raised. Apologies.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Marianne, go ahead.
Right, just one more little clarification question. This citizens petition has to go to town meeting. Is there any wiggle room to adjust the language within the citizens petition to make it consistent with how we want to proceed here? For example, right in the beginning, they say we request the town of Sherborn to pave Rockwood Street. What if they said to proceed with plans toward the eventual pavement of Rockwood Street? Is there that possibility open to the citizens?
You can change anything on town meeting floor. You can.
Yeah.
So anything you change the town meeting floor. But honestly, that changes such concept that literally makes it from like a $1.5 million project to like a $15,000 project. You know what I mean? I think
exactly my point.
Yeah, I think that's too much of a change. I'd rather have the select board go forward either with its own article or just simply appropriate something from our discretionary funds, as we previously discussed.
Well,
And
my question is whether we want to do it or not, but legally, are they allowed to change the wording such that it's more likely to pass?
yeah, on town meeting floor, anything. The proponent, John, he can go to the town meeting, he can stand up there and he can say, this is my new wording for this article. And it's voted on it. So it's quite broad. There's quite a bit of broad authority for the citizen petitions, as submitted, and what can be done on town meeting floor. It really is.
Oh, I mean, that's a suggestion that I have so that, it wouldn't just be shot down. And that's the end of it at town meeting, because if it's shot down entirely, the select board, I mean, we would have to have a separate article or not, or go ahead with funding, but it would be better not to have it actually, disapproved at town meeting first.
That's the thing. So against my better nature, I'm going to give political advice. My political advice is actually withdraw the article, because if it gets voted down, people get a stink about it. It probably will not get voted for. I don't think advisory is going to recommend it. I don't think this board is going to recommend it, or I should say, whatever, support it. And once it gets voted down at town meeting, that's a good point. It actually kind of gets a political stink about it. And I think I know John asked, what if it gets passed? It probably won't get passed. What's the last citizen petition to pass here in Sherborn? Has been a citizen petition in the last 10 years that's passed? Does anyone remember? Paul, does anyone remember?
Yeah, I think last year there was something about animal pets, cruelty to animals.
Okay, did that pass?
I don't think those did, but the thing here is we can't pass it because we don't know what it costs. They can't even vote on it. You have no
That's the thing.
idea. It isn't even clearly defined unless you want to change it on the floor of town meeting. There's nothing to vote on. It should be withdrawn, in my view, also, just because it's not ready for prime time. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but it's not remotely ready to be voted on.
And I'm just talking politically here, and I fully agree with you. This board is probably not going to make a decision until the 24th. We see it. I don't think this board would support it, to be honest with you. We'll see. But I just, being realistic, I'm just giving political advice to John as a proponent and the other butters of this road, that citizen petition have a huge threshold to make. They just do. If it's not supported by a town board, town committee, if it has good standing, it does. But a citizen petition that potentially obligates a financial obligation, I just don't see it happening. I can't imagine the last one that's happened, to be honest with you. That's why I'm just giving personal political advice on this, and maybe notify this board, put us on notice, like they've done, that maybe there's an obligation. It is a public roadway, that we take a look at it, take a sincere look at it, and see if it allocates further support down the road. It's also why I'm thinking that maybe it shouldn't go before town meeting as a study, because town meeting might vote it down, and it's a good chance it'll vote it down. And at that case, it's almost a further political statement about it, that maybe we keep it at this level. And that's just my advice. I just being honest about it. I think we're beating this up a fair amount. I think I know what direction we're going to go, but I'll still hear from Sean, then John.
Paul has his hand up.
I think it's left over, though.
Oh, yeah,
I had mine up.
Yep, no, Sean, then John.
I was
Yeah.
just going to point out to John and Jade that this article's doing exactly what you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
Here we're all talking about it. We're going to talk about it again on the 24th, and maybe the thing will hang around to get to the advisory hearings, and you'll get a lot more than the typical call, have Sean come fix the road. It's having the effect it needs to have. I mean, I couldn't run out in front of this and have had a study yet, but we'll see where we can get with it.
That's a really good point. John, you want to say something?
I appreciate that, Sean, and thank you again for all the work you and your crew do. You're really responsive. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the comments on this. I know we've taken a lot of time. Two more questions. Number one, when presenting this at town meeting, can we show photos? Is that allowed, and do we have the ability to do that?
Yep, per town moderator. I think you're given, remember, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. What are you given to do a presentation? 5 minutes, yep. So any proponent can give 5 minutes presentation, absolutely.
Okay, great. And if it were to pass, can somebody just point me in the right direction of what happens then in terms of, like, does it go back to the highway department? And I'm happy to take that offline with somebody, but I'm just curious what then?
As Paul indicated, if it passes, it's from the legislative body, from town meeting, and it's just an authorization. This isn't even authorization to spend. So essentially, there's no requirements. It just is saying, okay, we'd like to pave the road. The legislative body, that's town meeting, said to the town. So there's no obligation to spend funds. There's no authorization to spend funds as a part of this. One, I think it's very, very, very unlikely it'll pass. And two, if it does pass, there's really no obligation to actually do anything to the road. Let's put it that way. No authorization to spend funds. So I know it doesn't, probably not the answer you want to hear, but it kind of is the answer.
Sure, but then it would be at the opposition of the vote of the Sherborn town voters, correct?
Yeah, you'd have to have a separate article that actually expense funds, authorizes funds to spend it, especially funds that's significant. That's the thing. If this work would be done, it'd probably be the most significant capital project taken by the town that year.
Sure. So I'm just asking though, if the Sherborn town voters vote to move forward on it and it's not done, that's in opposition to what the Sherborn voters have voted for, correct?
Yes and no, because they're not voting to authorize funds. You know what I mean? So usually something like this goes hand in hand with a cost estimate and expenditure. It'll
Yeah,
say
that's fair
like,
enough, but that, I guess that could work in our favor, right?
Yeah.
Because it is broad enough that it could feasibly pass.
sure, but I'm just being realistic. I gotta be honest with you. Anyways, yes, that is the chance that could happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Marianne, and then I'd like to move on. If there's no motions relative to this, I'd like to move on with a non-decision. Marianne, you had a hand raised.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it very well could pass at town meeting. Someone will stand up and say, where's the money going to come from? And Eric will say, well, there is no money. We would have to authorize such and such. And people would say, oh, well, there's no money involved. No problem. Let's vote for it. Anyway, that's just my thought.
So I'm just going to clear up with the board. Are there any motions relative to this article? Just to bring this to.
Yes, I would move that we take no action on this article, and my basis is because there really isn't enough information to take any action.
All right, do I have a second for that? For the purpose of voting, I will actually second that. So vote to take no action. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Paul?
No.
Okay. And I will vote aye myself. I think it's appropriate, and I think it's actually in the best interest of the proponent as well. Okay, moving on. Drew and his Brittany Spaniel are next. I think we have here, was a change of Board of Assessors from elected to select board appointed professional assessors.
Yep.
Drew, thank you for being patient. And again, I'd like to see a Brittany Spaniel live at some point.
Yeah, I think one of these days, as soon as the board authorizes pet attendance, I'll be happy to bring him in. So I did put together just a couple of slides if it's helpful. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to share.
Yeah, you're good to go, Drew.
Okay, good. All right, tell me if you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, I think that, conceptually, this is pretty straightforward. Let's dive into kind of the why, and feel free to jump in with any questions. So looking back at the 2011 report that UMass Boston did for the town, just to kind of assess operations in the town. One of the things in that report was kind of a list of criteria that favored appointing versus electing boards. Literally every single criterion, I think, with respect to the Board of Assessors operations falls in favor of appointing. It's a technically complex role. Nobody knows what exactly is involved. The board does not set policy. It simply follows the law to assess home values or property values, and then to set the levy. So, I think just from that kind of abstract perspective in the report, I think there's a strong rationale to consider making the move. Why do it now? Because assessor's job isn't getting any easier, frankly. And it's also not getting any easier to find citizens of the town who are dying to take this on. One of the challenges of the role is that for people who are new to assessing, they have to pass a basic certification course put on by the Department of Revenue within 2 years of joining a board. And it's, I think it's like a 40-hour course. So you got to take a week off of work. Additionally, I think one kind of direct piece of evidence for the lack of interest in the town is we've not had a competitive election for an assessor's board seat in living memory. I've been here for 10 years. I certainly don't remember having more than one candidate. I don't know if we've ever had more than one candidate. And beyond that, I think the trend has been where there are opportunities to fill highly technical roles in town government with appointed professionals. I think the move, the trend has been to do that in town. We did that with the treasurer a couple of years ago. Other towns are making precisely this change. This change was recommended by the Department of Revenue to Dover within the last couple of years. A number of other towns nearby either are doing it or have made the move in the past. So what does this look like? Specifically, I think we're looking to vest authority in the select board to appoint individual members to the board. The terms would not change. They would remain at 3 years. The goal is simply to find a way to get some professional assessors from the neighboring communities onto the board. Those members are going to, the expectation is that they would be paid. My understanding is that the typical kind of payment is in the ballpark of like $100 a meeting. So three members and, say roughly 13 or 14 meetings per year. That puts us in the $4,000 to $5,000 range in terms of budget impacts. And then process, we need to draft this, but I believe the way this gets done is that we simply have the town meeting needs to vote to accept provisions of general law, chapter 41, section 21. Maybe the town has already done this for other roles. I don't recall. But that chapter essentially is just, it's got some boilerplate language and then, a yes or no. Strictly speaking, I also believe the warrant article is to authorize a town vote to do this. So there would need to be a vote of the town afterwards. So that was a lot of me talking very quickly. Any questions, any reactions?
Anything from the board? Sorry.
You could probably unshare now, Drew.
Yep.
I think it makes sense to everything, Drew's been involved with this before he was on advisory and after he's involved. So he's probably one of the most knowledgeable people too. And I think sort of adding to his point is that we have more of these sort of mixed use developments in town. So you can maybe have people that were used to single family home assessments, but now when you're trying to gauge a 160 unit rental unit or some other kind of complex, then it becomes much more difficult to do a proper assessment. You're not necessarily doing comparables at that point. You may be doing an economic value analysis or some other appraisal methodology. So as we have these more complex developments, it'll be even more difficult than it has historically been.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Marianne?
I agree as well. But Drew, just one question on the wording. You said professional assessors from adjacent towns, from neighboring towns. This would be an extremely part-time job. So, I mean, is there any reason to limit it to neighboring towns?
Yeah,
what if a professional in the town of Sherborn wanted to play this role?
Yeah, I think so. I guess there's two things that maybe I need to clarify a little bit. So in terms of the intent of the article, the intent is really to find a way for professional folks who know the area, who know the community, to be able to provide some input as members of the board. The way this gets implemented, though, is I don't think we're going to have any constraints on the board's discretion to appoint members. I don't think we're going to specify that they need to be professionals or non-residents or local or anything like that. I think the article is simply going to say, do we authorize the Board of Assessors to appoint members to the Board of Assessors?
Right. My question was, I posed my question because the language actually says from neighboring towns.
Yeah.
And from Sherborn or neighboring towns would be okay.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I think we don't have to include that language in the article. I think, it makes sense to try and attract those folks. I agree it's a highly part-time role, but, the town of Framingham, for example, has a full board or a full assessor's office. And, it's the kind of thing where you come in once a month for a few hours, you get a stipend or you get a fee per meeting. And I think it's
yeah, I have no problem with that. I think it's great. It's just the wording limiting it to neighboring towns is all I was commenting on.
Okay. So is that, sorry, have I been clear? I don't, that article, that wording would not make its way into the warrant article itself.
No, I think it's clear.
Okay.
I think it's any motions or any further discussion relative to this? I think it seems a bit of a no-brainer. board.
Yeah, I would move that we approve the article to convert the Board of Assessors from elected to select board. I guess it's select board would be the appointing body. Is that what we're saying, Drew? Select board
Yes,
appointed.
that's right. So it is, and I want to just, I've got section 21 of chapter 41 of the general laws in front of me, so I want to make sure. Yep, the select board.
Okay. All right, we have a motion there. Do I have a second?
Second, we haven't seen the language of the article, but I take your word
No.
for it, Drew.
Yeah, I think so. I do want to just maybe for clarity, I can propose this language. I think if we can get town council to review and sign off, this is not my day job. I certainly don't want to hold myself out as a municipal attorney in any way. So I think it would be safer for everybody if we had town council at the very least review and approve language.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely do that. And like I said, I think this is we got relatively simple language as well. All right, so is that a second, Marion?
Yes,
Okay. All in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Marianne,
aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I might as well. Very good. Thank you very much, Drew.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Drew.
Bye.
Okay, next up, ironically, after all, we're still a little ahead of schedule. Ali Hyde for a citizen's petition, declaration of climate and ecological emergency. I see a few hides here. Listen, if maybe you can turn your camera on or in some way indicate, raise your hand if it's you, if you want to speak to this. Oh, right there.
Hi, I have a presentation. Am I able to share my screen?
Sure. If
Yeah, you're good.
can make it happen. Okay.
Yep.
First, I want to introduce my group. I'm a member of the Sustainability Task Force, which is an environmental group of Dover Sherborn students, staff, and community members. And it is led by Dawn Vittori, the school's district business manager and a student co-lead. Our mission is to encourage conservation in our communities, spread awareness about environmental issues, and create change in our community that will move us towards a more sustainable future. I'm from the politics subcommittee of the Sustainability Task Force, and we are currently working to pass this emergency climate declaration article. We are in a state of climate crisis. Climate change has caused more frequent and severe flooding and heavy rain, droughts, extreme heat, and wildfires. We are additionally experiencing sea level rise, worse air quality, and lower water quality and quantity. Here's a graph that shows the change in temperature over the past 150 years. As we can see, the average temperature has risen significantly in recent years, and we've already experienced a 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature in New England. The spike in the 1940s can be attributed to World War II, and lots of climate legislation was passed in the 1970s, which may explain the brief decrease in temperature. Runoff from storms contain toxins from our streets, cars, and buildings. This water sinks into the ground and risks getting into our wells. Sherborn is solely dependent on residential well water, meaning if wells are contaminated or run dry, we have no alternative source of water. There are less days with rain, and rainfall is heavier on those days. If we don't address the root of the issue now, it will become increasingly necessary to spend more money on repairing damage to home and properties. Sometimes it's easy to ignore these changes because they seem to be only affecting other parts of the country and the world, but it's becoming more and more apparent how personal the negative effects of climate change are. The now observed higher frequency of more intense precipitation events lead to unexpected erosion of physical structures in Sherborn and surrounding areas. This example is of a failed culvert under Route 16 Washington Street in Sherborn this past year. Examples of damage like this are and will become more apparent in the near future. Cyanide bacteria blooms have been observed for the first time in Farm Pond the past 2 years. Cyanide bacteria is commonly referred to as harmful algae blooms because as it dies and cycles deeper into the water, toxins are released and can be dangerous for humans, especially younger children. It is also fast spreading and becomes hard to control after spread has started as the algae sink and rise in the water. This information is taken from the Sherborn Town website and linked to documents. Additionally, poor air quality and high temperatures cause residents to suffer more respiratory and heat-related illnesses. Higher temperatures lead to more days ticks and mosquitoes are out, which means increased cases of Lyme disease, AAA, and other tick and mosquito-borne illnesses. Sherborn has taken and is currently taking some actions to address the issue of climate change. Sherborn became a green community in 2011. Sherborn underwent a calculation of a townwide greenhouse gas inventory in 2017. We've hired 2 sustainability coordinators. We've increased insulation and air sealing at Pine Hill Elementary School. We are currently implementing large solar installations at the Town Department of Public Works building. There's a cleanup day in April, and for a while we had Y littering letters in the town center. And we are currently preparing a town-wide climate action plan to further lower the town's carbon footprint. And here are some actions Dover is taking to combat climate change. It is important that we not only focus on adaptation, which is changing how the town functions in response to an issue, but also mitigation, taking measures to prevent problems before they occur. This graph breaks down Sherborn's greenhouse gas inventory from 2017, which is mentioned in the previous slide with Sherborn's past actions. The light green on the left represents passenger vehicles, which contribute to about 44% of all emissions and is the highest sector. The light blue on the left depicts residential buildings, which contribute about 42% of all emissions and is the second highest sector. Together, cars and homes contribute a total of 86% of Sherborn's greenhouse gas emissions. These numbers are high due to a lack of public transportation, heating, cooling, and electricity needs, and older housing that is not well insulated. This graph shows that residents are mostly responsible for the carbon emissions in Sherborn. Progress in reducing townwide carbon footprint will depend on homeowners' actions in switching to clean transportation and clean heating and cooling technologies. Our article declaring a climate emergency asks the town to create a climate action plan addressing and explaining the benefits, costs, strategies, and tactics of reducing community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. It will identify and prioritize and publish a list of projects that reduce the town's greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, it asks the town to communicate to all town departments, businesses, and residents the critical need to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible. Over 20 communities in Massachusetts have already passed climate emergency declarations. Many of these communities are located on or around Cape Cod, where more severe effects of climate change are becoming increasingly apparent. We owe it to future generations to protect our planet and pass on a world that's not devastated beyond help. By passing this climate emergency declaration, Sherborn acknowledges the issues that we currently face, expresses support for the cause, and pledges to take action.
Great. Thank you very much. Any discussion amongst the board? Any questions or comments?
No, it was a great job, Ellie. You can add EV charging stations in Sherborn at Town
That's right.
Hall also. And we've installed one, and a higher voltage one is going to be installed shortly.
Good point. Marianne.
Yeah, Ellie, good presentation. I also heard this at, I think it was Energy Committee or some other committee. It was well done. A comment there that I thought was worthwhile to hear was from Dorothea and myself, and that is that I really love the graphics you have showing how Sherborn is impacted and to what extent Sherborn private individuals are largely responsible for climate change. So we can't just say the town should do something, it's you and me. But I thought that the power that your group has that's different from that of the say Energy and Sustainability Committee, or any of the adults for that matter, is that you are our children and grandchildren asking us, the people currently holding the reins, to make the changes for your generation and the generations to come. And I think you could make more of the fact that you are the children and grandchildren of Sherborn, appealing to your parents and grandparents to take individual action. That I'd like to hear more of that in your presentation, if you could.
I'll work on including more of that.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Yeah, Paul?
So just putting my lawyer's hat on, some of the things in the resolution we can accomplish without a town meeting vote. And there are some things that this board can do. And if you recall, when we were going through the budgets, I peppered the DPW superintendent about electric vehicles, and the same thing with the police department about use of electric vehicles, making the transition from an all gasoline fleet to some electric vehicles. And if you recall, the answer was that it's going to take time, and we don't have enough time for this year and maybe in future years and so on. But we have the power to do a lot of what's being requested here. So to the extent the resolution is to urge or exhort us to do more, it's excellent for that purpose. So I commend the authors of it and the enthusiasm behind it. That's a wonderful thing. And we do need to be encouraged as the elected leadership of the town to do more. There is more that needs to be done.
All right. And so you brought up a good question, good point there. So just to make sure, maybe to Ellie, is the language of this article similar to those other communities? You pointed out, it looked like at least a dozen other communities that have passed something similar to this. Is the language of this article very similar to those other communities?
Yes, it's fairly similar to some. I haven't seen language from all of those, but ours is roughly based off of Needham and other surrounding towns articles who were trying to accomplish similar things in their communities.
Okay, cool. All right, any other discussion or any motions from this from the board?
Move to support it.
Support. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Wait, real quick, I see a point of discussion. Kay Dye.
Yes, I did have a comment. I do applaud, high school kids getting involved in civic issues. My own daughter was one of the founding members of that group. And no one cares more about open space, and saving the planet than I do. It's why many of us move here to Sherborn. But I do want to caution that declaring a, quote, climate and ecological emergency is, possibly dangerous language. I don't know what that triggers. We all just went through 18 months of, quote, emergency lockdown measures. And so I just want to be wary of the word emergency. Sherborn is probably one of the towns with the most open land. Plus, we have successfully implemented numerous green initiatives, as was discussed on this call. We've even won awards, and we are getting, lots of funding for those initiatives. We've also just installed another electric car charging station, which someone mentioned. We also just discussed another citizen petition where the chair, Eric, said, quote, we shouldn't vote on something that doesn't have costs involved. So I just want to caution the language of the word emergency and the fact that we have no idea what this petition is going to cost our town. Thank you.
Thank you. I will make a comment on that it's not similar to the last one. It is not going with a cost appropriation. As a discussion with the, what is it? I can't believe I forgot already. Rockwood Drive was that the passing of it, as we discussed with John, obligates the community to nothing because there actually is no authorization to spend funds with that, nor this article as well. Anyways, there's a point there as well. Michael, please.
Sure. Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street. I'll speak first on behalf of the Energy and Sustainability Committee. And I could also say for the Stable Coordinators that obviously we greatly support this. And that, and to the extent of, to the recent comment that I think this article will just help the town reinforce its efforts to address climate change, efforts that the town has started and doing, but there's a lot more work to be done. And I think the benefits of doing this work now will certainly be much greater in the future if we start doing this now and not put off some of these efforts here. So we'll all benefit together that way, and that we do need to act together, that it's something that, even though it's individuals in their homes, part of our job with the committee, and I say with our sustainability coordinators, is to help people organize around it and do programs so that collectively we're much more likely to do action if we work together, and it's much more inspiring for ourselves, and that's why it's partially nice to see the students get involved as well. So I'll let you proceed with your vote.
Dorothea?
Just quickly, because I want to speak for us sustainability coordinators, Gina and I, this emergency petition helps us to really move forward with the jobs that were just recently established. And I want to echo Michael on as being this as a multi-generational effort, and I really welcome this motion, this petition. Thank you.
And I'll say, I know we're about to take a vote. We're mid-vote here. I do support this. I understand, might be some concern. We'll see it at town meeting of cost implications of it. But I think it's more than a feel good. I think it's a statement by the town. We are in one of the top 7 extinction events of the Earth's history. And I actually do think that, if this in some way actually makes a statement by the town, I think it's important to do so. So that's my thoughts on it. All right, all in favor? We have a vote, motion and a second. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I am as well. Thank you very much for the proponent. Thank you, Elia. And I think that brings a conclusion to the open session portion of this meeting. Therefore, as chair, I declare that a executive session is warranted for the proposed amended agenda item as previously proposed by Selectman Paul Durensis, our Select Board member, Paul Durensis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
And Paul?
Aye.
Okay, I might as well. Thank you, everyone. And we are now executive session. If you could turn off the recording, please.
Before you make the conversion, I wanted to commend you for guiding us through this long meeting and staying on schedule. I'm amazed that I had projected 12 o'clock before we would be done, and that was before my amendment. And you were able to deliver it into the end zone 25 minutes early. Thank you for that.
I thank everyone
Well
else.
done.
Not me. It's everyone else. Absolutely. Thank you as well.